Mm, 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 mm. Did I mess this up? I hope I didn't. Did I mess this up? I hope I didn't. Did I mess this up? I hope I didn't. Didn't mess this up. Okay. We are live. Oh, man, I super suck at these openings. If you're one of these people who are coming in afterwards, hi, how you doing? Thanks for being here. I'm really working on these openings. I like literally used to be I would start it and just be like, doop, 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 doop. So maybe I should stop commenting on that and just start the live stream. Live streaming, live streaming. Oh, I've got two of these. Oh, I'm so dumb. I'm very dumb. So we'll get rid of that one. We'll put that one there. That's good so that I can see the people who are coming in to chat. Sure, we'll get some people soon. Some lovely, beautiful people from all over the place. Oh, man. I woke up this morning, man. I just, had a tough time this morning. And I am going to go ahead and blame it completely on the blood moon. I just think that the blood moon meant, we all pretend like we're not connected to and don't get me wrong, I'm not like a hooba jubu like a astronomy guy. Hey John, how you doing, bud? I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time. You've been avoiding me. I understand. Good to see you, bud. Thanks for popping in. Happy blood moon. Happy blood moon. Just talking about the blood moon. It's a super blood moon. Like what? It's a lunar eclipse. What is it the combination of? It's like a lunar eclipse. Oh, come on, article. But why is it crazy nuts? Go away. Anyway, happy blood moon to you as well, Jeff. Thanks for popping in. You're earlier than you usually are, Jeff. Good to see you, bud. I should see if it's visible from the beach. I should go down. Okay, here we go. It is because there's a full moon. Oh, okay. And the satellite is closest to the Earth. Oh, okay. So you got a full moon, you got the lunar eclipse, and it's going to have a red-orange kind of tint to it. Expect madness tonight. Expect madness tonight. Things always get weird. I remember when I was in funeral services, full moons and any kind of solar or lunar event, things were weird. Things were definitely always a bit odd and a bit strange, and there was always some strange stuff going on. So, I'm a bit nervous because I just did a video on the National Post. Published an article from Michael Mostly, or Mostin. Sorry, my bad. I think I mispronounced his name in the video even. I'm so bad. But which is essentially pro-Zionist propaganda, apologetics at the very least. And I did that video, and I'm worried about the blowback that I'm going to get from it. That's good. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that because it's so important to me that we maintain a distinction between Zionism and Judaism, and call people out who don't create that distinction. Because, it's what we are seeing in Israel, the Israel-Palestine conflict. Is brutal. It's absolutely brutal, and we can't allow people, no matter what they do, to pretend as though Judaism and Zionism are the same thing, because they're not. Right? And people like Michael Mostly who defend Zionism by using Judaism as a shield, I think are despicable. It's despicable what they're doing. And it's despicable that the National Post is just publishing that stuff non-critically, right? If somebody writes an article defending Nazism, are they going to publish that? Maybe. Hi, Robin. How you doing? Robin, good to see you. Thank you for popping on in. All right, all right. And so let's talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I feel like what happened is that there was a ceasefire called, which Israel promptly broke and then reestablished. And then that's put everybody to sleep on the topic. I'm not going to go back to sleep on the topic, because just because they're not dropping bombs from fighter jets doesn't mean that they're not doing stuff. Like, what was the one I saw that was like, Israel court delays ruling on expulsion of families in Silwan, right? An Israeli court ruled to forcibly displace 7 Palestinian families in Silwan in favor of Jewish settlers in 2020. Like, this stuff is still happening. You've still got the IDF going in and doing mass arrests. You've still got the IDF murdering Gazans, right? Like, look at what has happened in Gaza. Like, look at this. Anybody who whinges at me about, like, oh, Hamas has fired some rockets at Israel. Okay, well, what was the result of that? Was it this? Was this the result of that? Right? Like, how dare the Gazans fight back? How dare the Palestinians fight back? How dare they? Right? Which is essentially the opinion of this Michael Mosley person. It's just like, how dare the Gazans fight back? Don't they know that we should be crushing? That they should just accept the fact that they are being crushed, right? That's the opinion of the West generally, and that's the opinion of Canada, and that's clearly the opinion of the National Post, that the Gazans should just roll over and die, right? That our genocide against them is just, and we should just be able to wipe them out. And anybody who says otherwise is anti-Semitic. No, we shouldn't accept that at all. And you have stories such as Ireland recognizes Israel's de facto annexation of Palestine. The Irish always seem to be standing up for the side of justice. Blinken visits Egypt. This is the Secretary of State, visits Egypt and Jordan to support the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. The Biden administration clearly wants this genocide to go on more quietly, right? Like, they don't like big splashy bombing. They don't like the aggressive actions. They want the genocide to be conducted the way that the Yemeni genocide is being conducted, right? Which is quietly, steadily over time, right? They want to starve them out in a siege, because starving citizens out in a siege is like a slow motion kind of thing that you can sort of quell in the press, right? There isn't, like, social media can't really capture the ongoing siege, right? That would require, like, flyovers, right? Like, if a helicopter, like if a reporting helicopter went over and actually, like, just filmed what was happening there, right? It'd be very obvious that what's going is a siege and it's an open air prison, right? But they won't do that because, and so they want it to be quiet. They want it all to be leveled and smashed out, and they want to have a siege and just, like, steadily starve these people to death, which is the goal. That's the whole goal of what they're doing there, and that doesn't make big splashy headlines. When you fly a fighter jet over and drop bombs from the sky onto them, well, social media can capture that. That's really easy. Like, that's a really easy spark point, which radicalizes lots of people, right? Because lots of people look at the situation, they're just like, okay, so Israel is dropping bombs in response to rockets, and then they see a video of the Hamas rockets, and it's literally like, which gets shot down by the Iron Dome in Israel. And then the response is, like, 6 fighter jets flying overhead, dropping huge incendiary bombs. So, like, people are like, that seems disproportionate. And then you do any amount of research whatsoever, and you come to realize that, like, oh, Israel is committing, like, a long-scale genocide since the 40s. So, like, it's pretty clear what's going on there. But they're hoping that the story will just go away, right? They're hoping, okay, so ceasefire, all's good now, right? It's done. You don't need to pay attention anymore. Nope. It's one of the several genocides that the Americans are propping up. And of course, they're doing it for good reason. So one of the reasons why Blinken is visiting Egypt, right, is again any reason to open the map. And I should just open the map at the beginning. I just forget to. So the goal of the American Empire and the Israeli state is to take this section of Egypt over. And they're very outspoken about it. They're not quiet about it. Like if you're the president of Egypt, you know, you're very aware that that's the case. Like it's not a secret. And so Israel wants to claim like this chunk of territory here for several reasons, right? Suez Canal, very important trade route right there. Also, this piece of land links Africa to the rest of this continent, to the rest of this world. And if Israel can take over control of that, it prevents China from building a road through here, right? Like China has a road that's built all the way from back over here, all the way through Iran to Tehran, click. And if they could go, they absolutely would. Build a road from Tehran to Cairo, absolutely, they would do that. But of course, the political situation makes that not tenable, right? Like you can't, China can't get into Iraq in the first place. And ultimately, as we move forward, Iraq may get broken up into several different states that, like, I wouldn't be too surprised to see so there's Baghdad and there's Basra. Just draw a line right between those two. Basra goes its way, Baghdad goes its way, right? And then the resources, which are generally in the north, that probably gets cut off too, and the Americans take that with Erbil. Like, I suspect that something along those lines happen, and once that occurs, perhaps China can make an agreement with whatever this state would be called, Basra, right? But again, then you need to push through Saudi Arabia, right? And then by that time, like, we're talking about decades and decades of political conversation. Israel will have probably already extended its interests into that area, because that's its role in the region, right? And that's the reason why this genocide is going to be constantly perpetuated, because they're never going to, they don't want these people here, right? These people are an inconvenience. That's really what it comes down to. They're just an inconvenience for the Israelites and for the Zionists. It's pretty sad how completely and permanently people are fooled by such simple conflations as Jews have been historically persecuted. Therefore, any criticism of the Jewish nation is anti-Semitic. Yeah, and it's important that the pro-Zionist crowd make that conflation, right? It's important that they do that. Because the reality is that the situation is actually quite straightforward, right? It's quite straightforward and quite simple, and it needs to be made complex. That's something that I've learned over time, is that most situations, in fact, are actually fairly straightforward, right? It's just that the offender needs you to get caught in this sort of illusionary mysticism of complexity where none exists, right? And once you understand who the groups are and who is at play, it is actually fairly straightforward what's happening. And then you've got people like Michael Mosley, who shows up and publishes an article in the National Post, which obfuscates. There's a lot of obfuscation going on, where Zionism is conflated with Judaism, when we should be doing everything we can to make that distinction and make it as clear as possible. Because once the distinction is made, it's actually really, like, what we are seeing is a classic, and I mean classic, like, it's a classic genocide. It is what the Europeans did to the First Nations people and the black populations throughout Africa, right? It is what the Europeans did to the Latino populations, the Aztecs and the Incans, right, all throughout South America. It's the same story, right? They've just turned around and gone the other way. Hey, Dave. Hey, Phoenix. How you doing? Phoenix, I don't think I've seen you here before. Thanks for popping in. Good to see you, bud. DM, nice to see you too, bud. Good, thanks for popping in. Since we've been in countless COVID lockdowns over the past year, will we ever have a series of climate lockdowns in conjunction to our current climate crisis? It only makes sense. I mean, I don't think they could get away. I don't think the popular will would be there for it. Like, why? Why should I stay home and lock myself away from my friends and family because of the climate change issue? At least the COVID thing makes sense because there's like a vectoring. But I mean, I guess I just don't see the narrative. I just don't see the picture. I'm open to it, but I just don't see how it would already be the case that like climate lockdowns and climate change. Dave, was it you that showed me that video from? I watched the one video, the change video. I forget the name of it, and then I also watched the one where the fellow was giving a speech about automotives, like the electrical vehicles, and how they're going to disrupt the market. Was that you? Library. Yeah, this guy, Tony Seba. Really, really worth watching this. I actually think that I'm gonna show this on Monday. I think this is my Monday show that I'm gonna show people. I don't necessarily believe that disruption is going to happen here in North America as cleanly as he presents it. And essentially the argument is that solar and electrical storage and things like this have become so cheap that they're going to undercut the fossil fuel industry completely, especially all the dirty sand, the dirty tar sands and things like this. It's going to undercut it completely, and there's going to be like a disruption in the market where suddenly it will just be cheaper to buy an electric vehicle than it will be to buy an oil-based vehicle, and so there'll be like this total flip around, and because of automated vehicles and things like this, there'll be people who just need less vehicles, right? And they'll need, so a person won't own a vehicle, they'll just be happy using electric vehicles like an Uber or something like that, because of course, like if I'm an entrepreneur and I have a little bit of money, well, why not buy one of these cheaper EV vehicles, create an automated system so that it's driving itself around, right? And then people just use them, right? That makes all the sense in the world. And so his argument is that you'll have less vehicles on the road generally, which I think is true generally. Just, of course, as fossil fuels decline, people won't be able to afford it. And there'll be less like single family ownership of vehicles is what he is saying. I don't think, and most economists do fall for this trap, I don't think he is accounting for the sort of insanity and sociopathic nonsense that comes out of Western culture, right? That like the same people who are like anti-maskers, the same people who are like you know, every time there's a technological disruption, like it's not like smartphones. Like with smartphones, it wasn't really replacing anything, and I think that's what my thing is that there's like a replacement issue where like we are currently still fighting wars for oil, right? We are still currently going out into the world and destroying countries for oil, right? The oil entrenchment in our system is deep. And the idea that these guys are just going to go like, oh, okay, that's over, electric vehicles now, I just don't think it's that clean, and I don't think it's going to happen that way. He presents a very hopeful message, and it's a mess like, I hope it goes this way. Like, I do. I hope it goes this way. That'd be great. But there's always a big old let's see kind of situation. And maybe he was right. Like, he did this video in 2017, and he was saying by 2020, electric vehicles will be replacing fossil fuel vehicles on the market, and it'll happen very quickly. But then COVID hit, right? And it just, COVID kind of upends everything for everybody, and kind of takes over the discourse, right? So who knows? Maybe we'll get out of COVID and suddenly it'll just be electric vehicles everywhere, right? And hey, Demand Better, how you doing? Good to see you, bud. Ward, are you familiar with the UK White Papers, Establishment of Israel? I think that my only familiarity with the White Paper is through Abby Martin's Gaza Fights for Freedom, which again, Gaza Fights for Freedom is an important documentary. If you've never watched Gaza Fights for Freedom, in my view, that should be the next thing that you watch. Gaza Fights for Freedom. As an analyst, I met Tony 10 years ago. I've been using the model since then. It's never been wrong. No matter what technology convergence I look like, has been conservative. That's going to change in the next 2 years. There's an updated 2020 version, COVID. The only car market that grew during COVID was electric vehicles. Cool. Good to know, Dave. Good to know. Glad you're here, bud. I'm glad you're here. Like, you're presenting a really sort of hopeful vision of the future, which I could use in my life. I could use that in my life. I'm kind of a doom and gloomer guy myself, but the one thing I will always do is, if I am presented with evidence and like scientific fact, I'll just kill my previous statements and my previous concerns because of evidence. And I think that's important to do. And I actually think that like, my background is like theological and theater and like the arts and humanities. And I think that that's well supported by the theological, I did it, practice when it's pursued honestly and not like these lunatics down in the Americas let you do. So I think I will be showing this video, Dave, on Monday. Mondays are my show time. So I'm just going to quickly bookmark that. And because I think a lot of people should see this. I think at the very least it's sort of this hopeful message that we are seeing progress. And if this guy's perception of how things are going to go is even remotely accurate, because like the number one challenge for fossil fuels at the moment, like isn't the number one transportation? I think it is, right? Just cars. So if that suddenly goes and flips over, and there's no incentive to get into tar sands, there's no incentive to get into fracking, there's no incentive, it just doesn't make economic sense. If that is in fact how this goes, then we might be able to do this, right? Like, we might actually be able to do this. And if it happens as quickly as he thinks it will happen, which makes sense because he's actually accurate. Like, smartphones are a great example, right? Nobody had any smartphones. There were no smartphones in the market, and then suddenly everybody had a smartphone, right? And it happened like boom. It was like a couple of years, and his accuracy in regards to computing power and how computers have gone. That computers just exponentially get better over time, and like the units get smaller, more efficient, and it just seems to go that way. And then also that like a lot of the components that are being used are recyclable and can be reclaimed and reused. So it's a message of hope. I think I'm going to play it on Monday. Hope you'll tune in. Yeah, exactly. EV sales in China went from 8.8 in 2019 to 20% last year, for sure. What the heck was the name of that show that you had me watch, Dave? It was that you're talking about the Venus Project. I've seen the fellow who, like, what's the name of the movie, and then what's the name of that guy, that older fella? I'm trying to remember the name of that, like the older fella who's clearly at the center of the whole thing. Because like, that's a film worth watching as well. If anybody has the who has the time to watch all this stuff, right? I guess it's crazy people like me. Jacques Fresco, yeah, I've seen that guy in a lot of stuff, and over time, Jacques Fresco and the change we want or the change we see. What was the name of that? I think I can just find it myself if I go back into my history again. Yeah, I watch my own stuff. I know. How embarrassing. How embarrassing. Oh, come on. The choice is ours. It's like right in front of my face.
All right, let's.
The choice is ours, right? And that's true. The choice is ours. Really, really interesting watch. I don't necessarily. Hi Ruth, how you doing? Thanks for coming in. I don't necessarily agree with everything they say, but they do lay out what I think makes this an interesting view is that it really does lay out the monetary structure and how it works in ways with clarity, right? It like this section here.
Thinking of
where is it?
And
when they start talking, if you just skipped to part 2 and just watched part 2,
let's
I think that would be extremely valuable for everybody, right?
So
that
people and
they do talk about the Federal Reserve, the monetary system, how it works, all of that, and there are lots of like this guy here, Daniel Rattenberger. I just had him. There you go. Ah, well. Anyway, this guy right here, boom. I've seen this guy do lots of stuff. I've been following him. I've seen a lot of his interviews, all of this kind of stuff. Abby Martin features in here, right? I do think that it is correct to present the kind of fraudulent way that the monetary system has been used. And it is fraudulent, right? It really indicates what I've been talking about that whole time, that merger of, it's the merger of the business sector with the public sector, which is what is understood, like that's classic fascism. When business and government merge, that's fascism. And so the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned bank, right, prints the currency that the public sector uses. Pretty clear. And that's been going on since like the 30s in America. So it makes all the sense in the world that there would be like a collapsing kind of thing. And it was 35,000 school support staff walk off job for 24 hours. No kidding. Is that here in Toronto? Support staff walk off job. Oh, okay. Let's click on this.
We're here today because we are daycare educators, we are special education employees, we are office staff, basically the support staff that support our schools. So we're not teachers, but we support our teachers.
Support staff in multiple English language school boards and French language school service centers across Quebec are on strike for 24 hours. In all, 35,000 support staff.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I agree with you completely, Dave. We need everyone to walk off the capitalist system. Like, we need a general strike is what we need. Like, this sort of action is really good, and it's the beginning. It's like there was the McDonald's strikes that happened throughout America. There's been dock worker strikes. I'm glad to see that these kinds of things are getting any kind of media attention whatsoever. That's really important and special. Glad to see that City News is not just ignoring it the way that our media does ignore these things. It always pays to remember that, like, the Occupy Wall Street movement was in, like, full swing for, like, a month, right? That there were people who had occupied the Zuccotti Park in huge numbers. We're talking thousands of people, right? And it was completely ignored by Western media. Completely ignored. And finally there was a breakthrough moment. Because a police officer pepper sprayed. Literally, there was just a young lady sort of like with a bagel in her hand or something, right? Like and a Starbucks coffee, just sort of like looking around, tooling around, drinking. And this cop comes by and just pepper sprays the crap out of her, right? And of course her reaction is horror, right? Like it's a horrible thing to have somebody brutalize you like this out of nowhere. And somebody caught this on film. And this clip started to go around social media, and that social media at the time was still kind of getting its legs and still sort of figuring itself. But it went around the internet, and the mainstream media could no longer ignore it. They literally were just like, oh shit, yeah, we have to at least address that. And then when they took the It opened that whole can of worms. Suddenly everybody was talking about it. But they ignored it for months. And if it wasn't for the fact that the internet existed and that there was like a spreading around through social media and all of this, if that didn't exist, I don't think the media would have ever reported on it. I think they would have kept a lid on it and they would have kept quiet about it forever, right? And it would have been one of those things that maybe they would have referred to in the business section of the Globe and Mail, right? Like no, the media wants to keep this kind of stuff quiet, but I'm glad to see that Canadian media, City News, is at least broaching the subject and is at least getting in on it. Yeah, there's City News, City News, City News, Global News. Okay. Oh, no, that's a different thing. Anyway. So far, City News is doing the work that should be done. Teachers have a lot of sway. That's true. Well, because they are, like, when you think about, like, public service workers, right? Like, the teachers are the big one, right? And the teachers, like, if city workers, like, who are responsible for licensing, let's say, suddenly did a strike or something, that would create, like, a minor inconvenience for people. But if teachers go on strike, that means your kids have nowhere to go, right? Because one of the primary functions of teaching and the education system in a capitalist structure is babysitting children so that their parents can go off to work for capitalists, right? That from the perspective of the capitalists, the education is secondary to the fact that the kids have somewhere to go while their parents go off to work, right? And so if teachers go on strike, well, now there's a whole and a very large voting bloc and a very large group of citizens who are completely disrupted by this. Because it's like, what do we do with this kid? I got to go to work, right? Like, we both have to go to work and slave ourselves to a capitalist system that will abandon us the second it's profitable, right? What do we do with this kid? And suddenly you've got people who have no money because capitalism doesn't pay appropriate wages structurally. And suddenly you have these kids who need to be put into, like, daycare, and daycare is very expensive because we don't subsidize it. We pretend as though daycare is really only available to the wealthy or the, like, people who are desperate. I've like talked to people who literally are just like, yeah, I come to work, I work a full-time job, and most of my wage goes to pay for my kids' daycare so that I can go work this job. But, like, the little bit extra that I get, I need that little bit extra to supplement the rest of our family's income so that we can pay rent and have food. Like, our society is despicable. Like, we live in, like, a pretty proto-fascist society and that kind of stuff. So I hope the teachers go on strike to really just highlight sort of the despicable nature of this arrangement that's going on. Like, if you didn't want teachers to have so much power, right, well, you would at least offer daycare to parents or something legitimate so that if the teachers go on strike, well, then they can put them off into daycare and everything will be fine. We are hoping media shows up to our rally on June 4th at Queen's Park. We are a small group fighting for ODSP and OW recipients to increase money. What time is that going to happen, Jeff? I'll show up. I'll cover it. Just let me know. Queen's Park, what time? June 1st. I'll even set a timer for myself. Sorry guys, just gonna do this. This is life, isn't it? You're all gonna watch me set a timer. Isn't that fun for everyone? You're all gonna watch me set a timer. Everybody's having lots of fun. 11 a.m. is absolutely perfect. Because that means I can actually come. Boop, 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 boop. That's it, Jeff. I'll see you on the 1st. Queen's Park. Oh, I should actually write that down. Oh, good. I'm glad to see that Rima will be there. I really like Rima. She's a, especially now, like seeing her go through this pandemic. Like, she has really been going after Doug Ford, and good. Queen's Park. ODSP rally. Okay. Back to it. I look forward to that, Jeff, and I look forward to covering it. Okay. Oh, did I close down my Reddit? Looks like I did. Okay. Yeah, where was the outrage when they landed a plane in Austria to try and arrest Assange? Yeah. This Belarus thing is still cycling around. For those of you who don't know, a plane gets landed, not in Belarus, but... So the leader of Belarus has a plane landed so that he can arrest a political rival. And of course, Western media is losing their mind about it, even though it's exactly the same thing that they've done to Assange. The difference, in my view, is that the political rival that the Belarus president has arrested has ties to like neo-Nazi organizations and far-right organizations, to which my response is like, oh, Nazis have no rights, so I'm completely fine with that. We finally reached the why don't we charge for air stage of capitalism. We all knew it was coming. If Brazil produces 20% of world's O2, then maybe the world should contribute towards upkeep of rainforests rather than expecting Brazil to maintain it for the benefit of for free. We pay Saudi for oil, why not Brazil for air? Yeah, like commodify the forests, right? Make it so that the forests, we have to pay people to protect them, right? That it's not like in our national interest or a military investment or anything like that. That's the thing that's always been funny to me about the clear cutting of the Amazon, is I've always been like, is this not a national security issue? It's the same thing with the deindustrialization of our country. Like, wait, you're telling me that we can't make anything? That we are reliant on a foreign nation to make things? How is that not a major national security issue? Like, I don't understand. Like, why wouldn't we be talking about this? Like, if I wanted to talk to the right wing and tell them, like, no, deindustrialization, like, neoliberal economics is bad because it's a major national security issue, right? Like, we should be scaring the shit out of our grandparents by being like, you want some foreigner to be, like, making all your stuff? Oh, you don't see how that could go bad, Grandpa? The Earth's resources must be declared the common heritage of all Earth's inhabitants. Yeah, I think that's true. Like in like a large philosophical existential sort of sense. Absolutely. The majority of our medication comes from other countries. Exactly. Like, that's crazy to me. Why pay Bolsonaro for cutting down the world's boreal forest and air quality? Yeah. Well, and Bolsonaro is a fascist, right? Like Bolsonaro and what's crazy about him is like he's open. Like, he's an open fascist. Like, the fascism movement that's been, the neoliberal movement that's been going out throughout this region. So what do you have going on here? Like, you've got Chile and Bolivia, as well as Venezuela, and have elected socialist governments. I'm not quite sure what's going on Peru, Ecuador. I know that there's like a big conflict going on in Colombia right now, where there's like huge warfare going on here, which makes sense. That America, they're like, okay, if we can't get Venezuela, then let's get Colombia, and then maybe we can get into Venezuela with Colombia. And then the major power in the region, Brazil, is literally led by an open, what he calls himself an eco-fascist, right? And the idea is that the wealthy should have access to power and resources, and that we need to purge the society of the poor, right? Because the poor just suck on our resource base. We should just get rid of them. So no, if socialism comes to Brazil, that means South America is going to be in this brilliant and amazing trajectory. But until such a time, and it's doubtful that that will happen. Like, fascists don't usually accept election results. I mean, take a look at Donald Trump, right? Like, if Donald Trump had military control, he'd still be the president, insofar as that exists. Toronto police leave homeless encampment in peace after residents say they're just a 24-hour anti-mask protest. Oh, the Beaverton. The Beaverton, nailing it again. What's so funny about that headline is I like read it. I thought it was like a serious headline, and then I started reading it out loud, and then I saw it was the Beaverton. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Like, these guys are always on point. They're always making something that's like seems as though it is, seems as though it's real, and then it's just got like a little twist on it. Inequality and competition reliably create sociopaths and psychotic behavior patterns. As a psychologist once stated, if I were not studying psychopaths in prisons, I'd study them in Wall Street. Yeah, the Wall Street ones are far more dangerous, right? Like the psychopaths that are going around as like serial killers, right? Actively taking a knife and like stabbing a guy, right? Those guys are way less dangerous than the bankers who are erecting social systems knowingly, right? That are knowingly, like, if you murder one guy with a knife, you're called a serial killer and a sociopath, and you get arrested by the police and you go to jail forever. If you kill 1 million people by erecting a system of poverty that guarantees their death, you get called a banker. Edmonton Police Service puts up thin blue line Canada flag on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. Those guys should be removed from power. Period. Right? Thin blue line is neo-Nazi propaganda. There's just no... The connection is there. The connection is obvious. There's no reason to use a thin blue line thing, especially here in Canada, at all. All because of the Malthusian-era beliefs that are entrenched in our society. And yes, the system is designed to kill people because of these beliefs. And that to me, I think, Dave, is where we're going to find more common ground. Like, you and I are going to differ in opinion about the nature of money itself, but the reality is that, like, it's the belief system. It's the ideological structure of our society that matters more, right? That if our society didn't have money, we still would be facing a lot of problems because of the ideological nature of the capitalist death cult, right? We've been taken over by a death cult that's obviously a death cult because it denies the existence of this existential crisis of climate change. It denies the existence of equality or rights. It withholds food and shelter from people in order to plunge them into slavery, right? We would be doing that without money. Like, we would be doing that without money, given the sort of sociopathic nature of the death cult. So, to me, the money has become like a way to track it, right? We can see what has happened because of the money, right? It's like a ledger of our activity. Yeah, that's why we need it. Yeah, we do need a new social aim as well as technology to rearrange, for sure. Absolutely. I agree with that completely. And there are some nations that are using, like, China is going to make us look like a bunch of assholes in the end of it all, right? Like, in 10 years, like, here, average anti-China fan. Here's Biden, average People's Republic of China enjoyer. And, like, in 10 years, like, when I turn, like, 50, so 12 years from now, China is gonna be so far ahead of us in terms of its advancement and its technological progress, and a lot of that is going to come down, like, a lot of this technology exists, but China is the one that's going to look at it, leverage it, create a plan, and execute it, right? Whereas we're still going to be pretending like the free market will decide. And sure, maybe we'll have disruptive moments where we have, like, electrical vehicles come in and any of that kind of stuff. But we'll have these electric vehicles come in amongst our crumbling infrastructure, amongst our tent cities, where there's just going to be impoverished people everywhere, right? And meanwhile, China will be like, yeah, we house our people, like we provide for our citizenry, and look, we're still building more infrastructure, we're still building. Like, China is building while we are destroying, and in 10 years, they're going to be so far ahead of us that the only people who are going to still believe that China, that we shouldn't learn something from China, or we shouldn't figure something out from China, the only people left who will believe that will be the fascists, right? Who are just there to attempt to maintain control over the society. So, and everybody else will be like, what the fuck? Look at this place. Look at this glittering diamond that's created like a peaceful negotiations with most of the rest of the world, while we're over here like we can't even barely get food and shelter for ourselves. It's going to get really, really obvious. China sees the golden ticket that the digital autonomous era is creating ahead of us and is racing to get there. Exactly. They know they can solve the issues. They investigated TVP's proposal years ago. Oh, the Venus Project proposals years ago. Well, and those proposals are worth looking at simply from a like, oh, here's somebody who like created a whole bunch of shit, right? Like simply from the perspective of like, oh, this guy had a whole bunch of crazy ideas. Well, crazy ideas, but a whole bunch of ideas. We should look at them. How serious are they? Can we embark on them? And once China starts like putting up solar panels everywhere, right? Yeah, but that's true to say as well, Ward. I'm not sure Chinese power players will handle that power any more elegantly than anyone else. I think the major difference, Ward, is that China is, when you take a look at what they're doing on the world stage, they're trying to maintain trade, and if you're trying to maintain trade, right, that's peace. Trade is peace, like flat out. Trade is peace. That if you're trading with the people, right, you're not bombing them. Whereas, I mean, America is doing exactly the opposite. So let's take a look at the map. So America has sanctions basically on everybody, right, through here. They don't have sanctions on Brazil because Brazil is a fascist nation, and so of course the United States are allied with Brazil. They have sanctions on Venezuela, Colombia, Chile, right? They've got sanctions, Bolivia. They've got sanctions all throughout this region. They've got sanctions on China, Iran, Russia, basically anywhere the Silk Road touches, right? The Belt and Road Initiative, it did it. With the exception of European nations, right? There's sanctions all over the place. And if you're inflicting sanctions on like Turkmenistan, China, Iran, well, you're at war with those people, right? Like you are. Like just because you're not dropping bombs doesn't mean you're not at war. That's why it's called a Cold War, right? And they're hoping that these sanctions will steadily cripple it, but all it's doing is it's accelerating China and Russia's and Iran's desire to group up together and to create a solid military strategic alliance with one another. And so in that way, America is creating its own enemy, right? That if America just went, oh, fuck all this, and lifted all these sanctions and just said, okay, no, we're not gonna do this. Like, why are we pretending like sanctions are a good idea? And actually tried to do what China is doing. Think about how crazy this is. Like, the United States has had like military supremacy of the globe for at least 80 years, like 70 years, right? Well, what kind of building have they done? What building have they done? For real. Like, anybody? Can anybody answer this question? What have they built that you would say is something as significant as the Belt and Road Initiative, right? The Belt and Road Initiative is an enormous trade route, high-speed rail system that goes all the way through here and is going to go all the way through Africa, right? So in the same amount of time that America has essentially plundered these regions and has like extracted resources from these regions, China's going in and building high-speed rail and infrastructure to help trade with these regions. Like, you can critique China all you want, but like they're building, and they're trying to build, and they're trying to create inroads with other nations, and they're trying to treat these other nations with respect and dignity. They're not going in and bombing them, right? They're not trying to do that. Like, and that's literally how America operates, right? It's very akin to, like, the Romans actually literally had a policy. The Romans had a policy in place. You can actually see this in the HBO series Rome, which was a beautiful, brilliant series that got cut short because there's a huge fire that burnt down all their sets, and it was too much money to rebuild all the sets, so the project just gets canceled. So, which is heartbreaking because they really were creating something important, I think. And Rome, they explicitly showed it. The policy of the Roman Empire was to go into a region, take 10% of the populace, and exit and crucify them. Literally, this is what they would do. They would walk into the region, grab 10% of the people there, and just crucify them, and then they'd start asking questions, right? And that's essentially how the United States works. They just go into a region, blow the place up, steal as many resources as they can, and then maybe they'll ask some questions. As opposed to China, which walks up to the border of the region and says, "Hello, we'd like to trade with you. Can we enter?" And the people say, "Yeah, I guess so, China. Can we communicate?" "Yeah, great." Like, will there be a moment where China leverages its power illegitimately? Of course. They're a group of people. Of course. Right? But would I prefer to have the China method of interacting with the world as opposed to the United States method of interacting with the world? Yeah. By a very large step. Yet China operates on a 100-year plan. They update every 5 years. That by itself is like, we don't have anything like that. We let the free market decide. Like, it's just like let chaos reign, right? Iran helped Russia create their new hypersonic missiles. Gotta do what you gotta do. A geographic center of power seems like an archaic idea. Yeah, power centers generally. Like, when you think about how, like, if power generation moves forward, right? If power generation moves forward with any success, there's no reason there should be a centralized power grid, right? That, like, if I own a house and I have solar power on the house, and that solar power is producing more power than I use, I should be able to sell that back to the power grid at a profit for myself, right? And there's, like, literally no reason we shouldn't do this. And if every single individual house is producing enough power to for their own usage and then more for other people, well, how is this anything but a complete decentralization of how power is generated and how power works, right? And, like, once you start getting into, like, that kind of line of thinking, things can get very interesting very quickly. Like, what's to stop somebody from having a vehicle with solar panels on it and just roaming around nomadic style? Like, what's to stop them from doing that, right? Except that the powerful people don't want people to be doing that. If you have nomadic people, it's difficult to enslave them to a stationary factory or something like that. I don't understand why you sanction a country building and manufacturing everything you need when you could just take your business and money back home and hire your own. Because it's all about their own personal money, Ruth, right? Like, if I can have, like, a stable manufacturing base in my home nation, and I make $1 million with that, or I can ship it to some other country somewhere and I can make $2 million, even though it means the complete abandonment of my own people. So it's just greed, right? It's just this kind of sociopathic greed, which is why I think it's super important that we create, like, maximum wages. Like, I would say that anything more than $1 million, you don't need it. Like, you just don't need it. It's not important. And if you capped a person's wealth at $1 million, that would stabilize the society. Because, like, if I could only make $1 million, then why would I ship manufacturing overseas, right? Why would I take the effort? Because all of the excess money is just going to get taxed away anyway. So I might as well leave my manufacturing in the United States. I might as well just leave it there and just be like, okay, that's fine. And these guys can get paid super well, and that's all good. Because like any excess money I make, I might as well trickle it back down. Like this is the ultimate failing of the trickle down economics argument, is that they pretended as though the money would just trickle down naturally, that it would just be like, oh, I'll just do that by a course of my existence, when we really do need to incentivize spending by these guys. And the way to incentivize spending is you say you're capped at $1 million. And so anything I earn above $1 million, well, I might as well spend that down. I might as well get rid of it because it's going to be taxed away anyway, right? So governments and borders only exist because of the battle to control resources. A global resource-based economy means we can get rid of that issue. I mean, yes, that like the idea of nations, like the concept of nations is actually relatively new, right? The whole concept that there's a national or a nation within these borders that we create, and there are like historical regions and things like this. The concept of borders is actually really, really complex, and has a lot of like. Shouldn't there be a moment where the people who live in the region can say like, okay, like we have jurisdiction up till this point? Seems reasonable to me. So anyway, I won't go too much deeper because I don't actually know that much about it, but sounds great. But what if China sanctions us? This is the thing, Ruth, is that they don't have to sanction us. Like if we sanction everybody, then we have actually sanctioned ourselves, right? Like if Canada and the United States sanction all of this and sanction all of these people and sanction all of this, right? If we sanction everybody and then all of the people we've sanctioned gather together and create a system outside of us so that they can avoid all of those sanctions, right? And they just agree with one another that we'll just trade, we won't worry about the United States, right? We'll just trade. Then the United States has sanctioned itself. And China doesn't need to put on an official sanction. They don't need to go like, oh, you're officially sanctioned, right? Because the United States has sanctioned itself. And that's the road that the States is on. The road is on, the States is on this road. The States is on this road of self-isolation. I would argue, Dave, that like our social structure creates greed. I think our social structure elevates greed. Like I think greed is within us. Like it is actually like this is the one thing I really disagreed with about that video, The Choice Is Ours. They seem to have a really like rosy view of humanity that I don't agree with. Like I think humans have greed, have envy, have jealousy, are violent, right? Like these are things that exist within humanity. It's just whether or not our structure rewards them or not, right? That if we have, and we do have a societal structure that rewards greed, that the greedier you are, the more rewarded you are by our society, and there's no system in place to say no, that greed should not exist, that to put a damper on greed, or even punish these kinds of activities. You're right about that, Ward. Nationalism is a tricky psychology. It for sure is. It for sure is. And the minute you have inequality in any system in nature, you have a competitive environment, and that environment creates jealousy, greed, and antisocial behaviors. And we are the most social creature. Yeah. Well, dolphins. Dolphins are pretty social, dude. Or the capybara. Or they just don't service us and we are lost. Humans aren't nice. Science shows otherwise. Greed is a result of environmental pressures. I mean, I just feel like you kind of restated what I said, but with the word science in there, right? Like, yeah, like if there's no reason if there's no incentive, if there's no reward for greed, then the greed won't take over. But like, greed exists, and it comes out of us, for sure. And it is just whether or not we want to acknowledge that and create systems that heighten or augment it or reward it or not, right? And if we create systems that reward it, then we're gonna do it because greed comes from us, right? And if we create systems that don't reward it, then we won't do it because, again, greed comes from us, and it's a very natural thing to be like, oh, well, if I'm not going to actually be able to get the reward for doing this, then I'm not going to do it. Yeah. No, but I think we agree. Get rid of that environment and it will not manifest, but the manifestation comes from within us, right? And that's kind of the concern, is that even the process of creating the systems that don't reward greed is going to be confronted by a group of people who want greed to be rewarded, right? And so that to me is sort of the central difficulty. Is how do we get to this society? How do we get to this Venus project without ultimately confronting capital, right? That's what we actually have to do, is confront capital. And we have to confront capital through general strikes, because capital wants greed to be rewarded, because the people who are benefiting from the system are the greedy people, right? Young Ontario residents giving up on home ownership survey. Yeah, I gave up on owning a home when I was a teenager. I took a look at the world and I was just like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to own a house. What are you talking about? You've gutted our manufacturing base. Where am I going to get a job? Starbucks? Can't get a house with a job at Starbucks. This gets into a really large question, Dave. Under the illusion we are individuals capable of free will and self-determination. To a degree, we are. And I say to a degree because I see where you're coming from. There's a lot of environmental factors, right? And I think it's important to say, okay, you got this environmental factor, and to list out all the factors. And when you do that, there is a huge list of factors. This is what the right ignores, right? That there are environmental factors. And this is what the far right, people like Jordan Peterson, right? They just ignore that there are these environmental factors, and that you can actually list them, and you can actually categorize them, and you can actually sort of figure out what those environmental factors are. But one of the other factors that does exist, even though it's quite small, I think, right? And I think it is quite small, is that there are individuals that are individuals are capable of free will and self-determination, right? That is a part of the overall structure of our existence, right? That is what makes everything kind of complex and difficult. You can decide to no longer be a racist. You can make these decisions. Is it more difficult if you're in a society and you're surrounded by racists? Yeah. Because there's all of this, right? Because there's all of this. But there is this as well. And because, and I don't think this should be elevated to supersede any of this, but I don't think it should be swept away and ignored, right? I just think it should be treated with the same, it should be treated as a variable. It does exist and is within sort of the framework of all things, which is wild. It's wild. The way that it all connects together, and the more you think on it, the more you dwell on it, it gets it's a very intense sort of situation. Sport is a manifestation of greed. Winning is the goal. Ha. Too bad, Ward. Pun intended. Yeah, sport is interesting because it is a manifestation. Like there is a desire to test your mettle, right? There is a desire to challenge oneself within us. I think that that's just true. That and sport is a way to funnel that kind of human desire to like test your mettle and test your strength, right? And to grow and challenge, right? And to have groups coming together to actually do that. And like I take a look at something like the Olympics, for example, which Olympics is a manifestation of sport, but the Olympics has become like a really diplomatic, well, it always was. I shouldn't say has become, it always was. It's a highly diplomatic, and even though it's been co-opted by capitalist forces, it still has a great deal of diplomacy involved in it. And it's all hinged on the idea that like people want to be the best at what they're doing, right? And they want to focus on improving themselves and becoming the greatest, or challenging themselves to the highest level that they can be challenged. And I think that that's sort of natural within the human spirit as well. The brain has no mechanism to determine fact from fiction. So primary motivation. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. Like, there is a, yeah. So, good news. 1,095 new cases. Looks like the coronavirus is the vaccine is working. Right, we're seeing a decline in cases pretty sharply. That is also in place with that corresponds pretty closely. So cases going down, vaccines going up, right? And so looks like it's being successful, and there is successes. So here comes the media push to sell us all back to the capitalist class. We still have a choice of who we become, so being lazy and not choosing to learn about others is a choice. Yeah, I come from racism, but I decided no. And I raised my children in that way, so we're literally a mixed bag of everything in our family. Yeah. That, and it's always a mixed bag. It's always a mixed bag. Can't wait to enjoy a nice normal summer. Doug Ford. Fuck you are. Yeah. I mean, if I'm Doug Ford, I absolutely do not want another spike up, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, he took so much heat because of the third wave that he and the conservatives inflicted on us. But we, so if I'm Doug Ford, I absolutely do not want another wave. Or if there is another wave, I want it to be seen as unavoidable or something that's like not necessarily within his control, right? Like that's how the Manitobans have kind of treated Brian Pallister. Like Manitoba had a really bad spike up. They're in the middle of like literally they are actually doing a real lockdown where everything is locked down. They're doing it like that's how bad it is in Manitoba. But nobody in Manitoba is like, Brian Pallister, this is Brian Pallister's fault. Like, sometimes shit does happen and people try their best and the worst outcome happens anyway, right? And, but in the case of Doug Ford, like, we have documents showing that they knew there was going to be outbreaks and they let them happen anyway. Like, we have admission by the Ford administration itself that the third wave was avoidable. We could have done a lot more to avoid it, and instead we just like plowed right into it. Right? Disconnect between productivity and a typical worker's compensation, 1948 to 2014, right? Oh, look what happened. Oh, look what happened. Oh, look what happened. Well, I mean, if it follows the same logic, like the spike will come by fall, no doubt, maybe a new variant, yeah, and an unvaccinated population, yeah, to a degree. And I mean, if it follows the same logic as the second wave did, right? We're going to send all our kids back to school. They're going to mingle with one another. That's how it's going to spread. And then, of course, we're going towards Christmas, right? By the time we hit September, October, November, we're in Christmas. And the capitalists are not going to want to lock down over Christmas. They're absolutely not going to want to lock down over Christmas. And that's what happened in the second wave. I worked at a toy store during that period of time, man. Like, it was really obvious that the capitalists were just like not interested in locking down over Christmas because they know that that's the end of capitalism. If capitalism locks down over Christmas, that's even once, that's the end of Christmas. That's the end of capitalism. They know it's true. And like you'll find if you actually start to take a look at a lot of economic info, 2014 seems to be the moment when we stop reporting on lots of things, right? It is as though the media was like permitted to report on how our economy was doing in these sorts of ways up till 2014. Like the last time that there was a report on how much money has been hoarded offshore by Canadian corporations, 2014 by the CBC. I've never found anything new. So it is very clear that they have been told, no more reporting on that. Thank you very much. We certainly can't create a chart to see how much wealth has been offshored over time. That's certainly not something that we can do. A QAnon conspiracy theorist, a racist, and an anti-Semite walk into a bar. Bartender says, "What do you have, Congresswoman Green?" That's pretty funny. Yeah, Marjorie Tyler Greene is insane. She's nuts. Conservative. So a janitor should make $15 an hour? Yes. And I guess kids flipping burgers should make $15 an hour? Yes. Next, you're going to tell me the grocers should... Did you just have this list of people you don't respect ready to go? Yeah. Like, everybody should be making a living wage. Like, if you're working, you should be making a living wage. I am of the opinion that if you are alive, you should have a living wage, right? That we should subsidize people's lives through a basic income, right? Or if not a basic income, if you want to go even crazier than that, we can do it directly, right? Give people housing, shelter, give people food. I actually think it should be embedded in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If I were the Prime Minister of this place, the number one initiative that I would be working towards, it would be to create an amendment for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to say that food and shelter is a guaranteed right. And if the private sector can't provide food and shelter for its citizenry, then the government will. It seems very straightforward to me. Like, if you live in a society that is not providing food and shelter as a byproduct of your existence, then you don't really live in a society, right? You just live in a company that's enslaving you. We're going to get a bunch of really nice pictures of this Super Blood Moon coming. Super Blood Moon! Looking forward to it. It's tonight. It's going to be beautiful. Hopefully, after I'm done this, I'm going to check and see if I can see it from here. It'd be nice. No, it's not in the charter. That's just it. They were debating whether or not to put it in the charter, and then they ultimately didn't. Food and shelter is not guaranteed in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Your right to complain about it is. Capitalism does not exist to solve problems. It only exists to profit from them. And if they cannot profit from it, they have no interest in it. Yep, exactly. Panama Papers just went away. Nothing to see here. Exactly, Ward. Just nothing to see here. We have all the resources to do that and technology as well. The only reason we're not solving the issues is because nobody wants to pay for it. Well, and it doesn't behoove the capitalist class. Like, if they can't meter a power technology, right? Like if there's a power technology that came in and offered free power to everybody in a decentralized way, but they couldn't meter it, it was just there, then they wouldn't do it. Because and in some cases it's not about the profit. Like in some cases, like take a look at our current system of poverty, right? Our current system of poverty costs us more, right? It costs the capitalists and the taxpayers more to keep people in tent cities, to keep people in poverty, to keep people suffering and on the streets. It costs them more. And they know it costs them more, right? The studies are out, we know, right? It costs more to keep people poor, on the streets, desperate, dealing with police services, dealing with food banks, dealing with shelters, dealing with these places. It costs the society more to do it this way. And the capitalists are fine with that, right? So here's a situation where the capitalists are actually fine with losing money on the deal. Why? Because it keeps people desperate, it keeps people poor, it keeps people linked to the capitalist system. Desperate people are more willing to work your shitty jobs that nobody wants to work, right? So it has more to do about control and power, in my view, than it does to do with profit. And like, the capitalists are willing to commit a genocide in Palestine. What, you think they're not willing to do that to you? Of course they are. Yeah, they don't respect the charter about taking care of disabled. Here in Canada, the disabled conversation, really worth bringing up, Ruth, is we offer less to the disabled here in Canada than the United States does. So you think about how bad the United States is. We're worse when it comes to our treatment of the disabled. And you compare us to like countries like Denmark or Sweden or the Netherlands, and like we're giving 3 times less support to the disabled here in Canada than they are. It's despicable. It's despicable. What security does any Canadian have? We don't. We're completely beholden to a capitalist state that will abandon us completely, which is why we need to have a charter amendment ultimately, right? In 10 years, being off the grid is going to be cheaper than being connected to it. One can hope, we can dream, and we have solar coming in, everything from roofing to paint, all of it's cheap now. Yep. It just comes down to like the will and information. Like, lots of people don't know this, Dave. Like, that's I think a big thing. And like, our media is not going to report on it. Like, our media is not going to tell people that they can decentralize the power grid. Like, they're never going to do that because it doesn't benefit capitalists. Hi, the Olive Cat. How you doing? I don't think I've seen you here. Thanks for popping in. Yep, and it keeps middle class hostile towards them and buddying up with the rich. And even if it's not hostility. Oh, hey, Chris, I missed you the other time. Good to see you. Even if it's not hostility towards the poor and the lower class, there's that element of fear, right? Because people intrinsically, you look at a homeless person and you intrinsically know inside of yourself that capitalism will do that to you too, right? So you better keep working and you better work hard because we'll abandon you. You can be in a tent city, right? That's part of it as well. ODSP is a joke. Yeah, for sure. The analysts do not see it coming. Yeah. Not to mention that where it looks like it costs more to keep people poor, it is a boon to the underground criminal economy. Yeah, through human trafficking, weapons, drugs. That's a really good point, Olive. Like we are talking about people like Jeffrey Epstein was connected to everybody, right? Jeffrey Epstein was connected to Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, right? Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, right? Like, so he was like a connection point for all of these wealthy sociopaths, right? And where do you think he's getting his slaves from? Like, where do you think he's running this pedophile sex ring? Like, where do you think these people come from, right? It's not wealthy families whose kids are like going on a lark or something. It's poor people, right? It's people who are in poverty. It's people who are destitute, who have been invisibilized in the first place, right? And so Jeffrey Epstein has connection to, I forget her name, but he has like a cabal of people working for him whose job it is to go into the societies and find these vulnerable people who they can kidnap and enslave, right? And nobody talks about it, nobody investigates it, nobody cares, because they're just poor people anyway. They're just poor homeless people, whatever. They're invisible in the first place and they can disappear, right? And so maintaining this system of poverty allows that to continue. Yeah, absolutely. And if people weren't desperate, and if everybody was accounted for, and if everybody was not rendered completely invisible by capital, well, then it would make someone like Jeffrey Epstein a lot weaker. They couldn't just kidnap people and enslave them for Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, right? Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause for a minute. Just got to go use the washroom. Let's, is there something I could put on real quick? Nah. Chaircast. All right, we're back. We're back. Man, you guys are chatty today. I love it. I love it. Affecting people aging out of foster care, etc., basically pushes people through the system straight into the streets. Yeah, hands of criminals. Statistics Canada estimates underground economic activity for 2013 totaled 45 billion. Right? Like, I don't think that the population is mad enough for a riot yet. Yeah, well, I mean, we're too damn polite as a people, right? Like the whole polite Canadian thing is something that is well fostered, and we're supposed to like politely ask these sociopaths for things. Yeah, that's right, Dave. Just like education, well, and also like stop criminalizing certain behaviors, right? Like, how dare people smoke weed, right? For like years and years and years, we imprisoned people for having weed. Like, we're insane. That's crazy. BMO kicks off week of banks bragging about how much they looted from Canadians during a global pandemic. Yeah. BMO kicks off bank earnings week with a profit almost doubling to 1.3 billion. Yeah. Like, the transfer of wealth from the populace to the hands of these rapacious billionaire sociopaths has been completely obliterated. Like, we don't talk about it. But it's the largest transfer of wealth in the history of humanity. And we're just ignoring it. It just doesn't exist. And funnily enough, I don't know how to go about talking about it, because I don't know that because the media doesn't report on it, and because it's so difficult to actually get information about it. Like, I'd like to be able to talk about something specific in regards to that transfer of wealth and really focus. Like, I want the smoking gun is what I want. Anyway. U.S. unions are voicing unprecedented support for Palestinian liberation. Yeah, I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see it. It's because these unions, they know that what we're seeing in Palestine can come here, right? Like, yep, the capitalists will do to us what they're doing to the people of Gaza. Absolutely. We're not safe, right? Labor shortages end when wages rise, say some local businesses. No kidding. Oh, wow. Big surprise. Here's, how long is this video? If this video is only a couple minutes long, 10 minutes too long. Love this guy, Kyle Kalinske. He does really, really great work. If you don't know Kyle Kalinske, Secular Talk, he's a really powerful force on the left. Really powerful force. Really, really worth listening to, really worth paying attention to, Kyle Kalinske. GameStop, AMC short sellers, losing money. Hold on. I have 2 GameStop stocks. So I'm just going to take a minute, because I haven't even looked at it today. I could be a millionaire, guys. Could be a millionaire. All right, that's going to load up. Oh, wow. It's doing very well. I'm rich. I'm rich. Quit calling them capitalists. Capitalism dies in 1944. Look up Henry Wallace coup. Yeah, they are fascist. If you want my general opinion on capitalism, Dave, I actually like. I don't see much difference between capitalists and fascism, right? Like, I think that the distinction line, like it doesn't really exist, not truly. That like capitalism and fascism are distinct from one another on an extremely technical level, which is that level of the merger of business and the merger of business and government. But that merger has been going on since the inception of capitalism, right? That capitalists go and enslave a population and commit a genocide against another population, and they do so at the behest of the government, right? That the government allows these businesses to do this because of this merger that has already happened. And you have more egregious examples like the erection of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which is explicitly fascist. But I find it really interesting because anytime I've investigated, like, what is fascism, right? Anytime scholars ask this question of what is fascism, quote unquote, the assumption built into the question is that fascism is different from capitalism, and they assume that. And because of the assumption built into that question, it allows them to create this entire academic pursuit, which is important and should be investigated, but without including in the conversation, wait, isn't this just capitalism? And when you actually take their results of studying fascism and the conclusions that they make, and you apply it to capitalism, you can see very cleanly, oh, this is capitalism and fascism are the same thing. Like, they are the same thing. It's just that you create a... ultimately, fascism is what capitalists call other capitalists they don't like. And so it ends up being mainly a propaganda term. Because capitalism has always acted the way that fascism has always acted, right? Like Hitler had concentration camps. Capitalists have concentration camps throughout their whole history, right? Hitler had a war of aggression against neighboring countries. Capitalists have had wars of aggression against neighboring countries. Hitler created a genocide. Capitalists have created genocides. Like, I am yet to see one single example given that describes something that is exclusively fascist that you can't look at capitalism and go, well, what's that then? So the two are the same, right? They're not distinguishable from one another, right? That if capitalism, that in our media system, like, if we are the beneficiaries of capitalism, then it's capitalism. And if we are the victims of capitalism, then it's fascism. And that's generally how it's talked about. And there are, like, fine, like, distinctions. Like, I do think that the true merger of public sector and the private sector, the true merger of business and government, is when fascism, like, you can explicitly say this is, like, rampaging fascism. But capitalism, like, lays the bricks for that, right? Like, capitalism is, like, laying the road to that. So I don't really see it as a distinction, but it is the moment, that connection is the moment when you can explicitly say it's fascism. But capitalism, absolutely, like, when it comes in and people are like, capitalism, well, it immediately begins laying the tiling and laying the road to that inevitability of that linking happening. So in my view, fascism and capitalism are intrinsically tied. That fascism is like a logical result of capitalism. And so the two are just like, boom. What is GameStop? Okay, I'll try and break it down for you as fast as possible, okay? Really great question. So GameStop is a game company, right, that everybody in the hedge fund industry, so the guys who make the money on Wall Street and on the stock market, right, everybody assumed it was going to go out like Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster went out, GameStop's going to go out, right? They just sell video games. You can download video games. Why would anybody go to a GameStop, right? And so a bunch of hedge funds did what's called a short on the stock. And what a short is that you're actually betting that the stock will decline in price, right? And if the stock does decline in price, you get money for betting against the stock. Yeah, does it sound horrible? Yes, because you're essentially betting for someone to fail, and if you're a billionaire sociopath and you place a bet for somebody to fail, you can absolutely manipulate the market to ensure that their failure occurs, okay? So, but this is what's happening, right? This is a normal kind of thing. If you're interested in the 2008 financial collapse, you should watch The Big Short. It's got Steven, the fellow from The Office. Anyway. And like just a whole bunch of really great people. The Big Short, really, really, really worthwhile watch. So, hedge funds short GameStop. They're expecting the stock to decline. They're expecting GameStop to go bankrupt and leave, right? So a bunch of Redditors on a site called Wall Street Bets, which you're seeing right in front of you here, Wall Street Bets, right? They all get together and start to kind of, and one of them, his name's Deep Effing Value, without the censorship, Deep Value, or Roaring Kitty is another name that he uses. He starts to realize that these hedge funds have shorted the position more than they have the money to cover it, right? That they have just speculated on this, and he postulates that they don't actually have the money, right, to short this stock. So if the stock rises, if the stock goes back up, these guys don't actually have the money to cover the loss of the shorts that they have, even though they must pay it back. And this is where the twist comes, okay? If I have something that you must buy, what's the value of the thing that I have? Just think about it for a minute. And if the answer that you came up with was as high as I can possibly make it, then you're wrong. If I have an object and you must buy it, the price of that object is as high as I can make it before you go bankrupt. So if you have $1 billion and I have something that you must buy, this is worth $1 billion minus 1 penny, because that's the amount that I can get from you without you going insolvent, right? And this is the situation that these Redditors found themselves in. And so en masse, these guys start buying the stock, and the stock goes from being about like $50 a share and spikes up to $500 a share. So a 10 times increase, okay? This creates a squeeze in the market where the price is only going to go up and up and up and blow up. And then, but what happens is that Robinhood, which is the name of the investment company that all of these Redditors are using, right? They cease allowing people to buy the stock. And they claim that that's because of they ran out of equity or any of this kind of stuff. But it's a major scandal. Huge, huge impact on this. But now what's happened is you have a lot of GameStop people who are holding the stock. And of course, the stock plummets. There's huge market manipulation going on in these hedge funds. Where they're trying, and of course, the stock market media tells everybody that, oh, no, we've deleveraged our position. Everything's fine. So the stock drops back down to about $50 a share. But these guys on Wall Street Bets go, that's all bullshit. That's all bullshit. We still have these shares. You're still shorted on the position. You still don't have the money to cover this short. You still don't have the ability to get out of it. And every single time the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, or any numbers come out, it reaffirms to these Wall Street Bets guys that, nope, we're holding on to GameStop. You've got to pay us eventually. Eventually, the squeeze will happen naturally. We know it will. It's just a matter of time. And the numbers are starting to go back up again to indicate that, yeah, that's going to be the case. Because the reason why the hedge funds have to pay eventually is because when you take a short, you start paying interest on the short, right? So these guys, the hedge funds, Melvin and Citadel, which are deeply embedded in this, they're paying interest. Like, they're paying for the privilege of having these shares, these stocks, and eventually they'll end up spending more on interest than they will just to buy them out. And eventually there will come a point where they have to buy them out. And when it hits the point that they have to buy them out, it's the people who are holding on with what these guys call diamond hands, which is another thing from The Big Short, that are going to, quote unquote, rocket to the moon, right? And they're going to just go straight up. And of course, there'll be lots of people, probably like myself, who once the stock hits a certain degree, I'll just be like, that's worth it to me, I'm going to dump out. But there's definitely going to be guys at the end of this story who, like this guy DFV, Roaring Kitty, that I mentioned before, he's going to walk away with $1 billion. He's got so much invested in this, he's got so much stock, he's got so much going on, that when it finally spikes up, like, they are going to phone him. They are going to talk to him directly, and he is going to set the price that he is willing to sell for. And he's going to walk away with $1 billion. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, that's the story in a nutshell, Olive. Yeah, that line was crossed the minute we allowed business lobbying. That was one of them. Yeah, for sure. Never mind police having too much power. Lawyers will run circles around the precariat. Yeah, for sure. Industrial prison system, forced labor. That's a big one, Jeff. Like, that's big. That's huge, right? Yeah, you go to Ukraine or Russia, they call it fascism. I mean, we are looking at fascism for sure. Like, it's difficult to pinpoint the exact moment that America became, like, explicitly fascist, but, like, it kind of always was. Like, it wasn't like they committed a genocide against the First Nations people. They committed a genocide against the South Americans, right? Like, they eradicated 2, 3 empires from South America. The Aztecs, the Incans, and the Mayans. Gone, right? That is a massive scale genocide that was perpetuated against the people of South America, right? By capitalists. And, like, that's not even including what happened in, like, the First Nations tribes. Like, they got wiped out. Oh yeah, please do, Olive. It's a good watch. It's just a fun watch. It's very and explains a lot. And that crew that comes together, they continue making really interesting movies. They're the guys that were behind the movie Vice. If you're not familiar with Vice, it's sort of a telling of Dick Cheney's story, and they do a great job. Yeah, most of Texas was part of Mexico, exactly, like this kind of stuff, right? Like, it's a miracle that Mexico still exists at all, honestly. And, like, when is the moment that I'm supposed to say this is when the United States became fascist? Was it after they eradicated the First Nations people? Was it after they committed mass-scale genocide? Like the amount of death and destruction that American capitalists committed dwarfs anything that happened in World War. Like, World War II was a disaster, it was a travesty, but, like, World War II didn't eliminate several civilizations from existence, right? Like, we pound on the pulpit about how evil Hitler was, but, like, George Washington was a demon. He, like, eradicated people, dude. No, you are actually wrong about this, Dave. That capitalism and the capitalist forces were well entrenched in all of Europe throughout that period of time. And sure, the monarchy still existed to a degree, but industrial capitalists were definitely part and definitely involved in major mass scale ways. Just go read Dickens, go read Blake. Like, it's deeply entrenched in all of that. How many Conservative MPs voted in favor of an act respecting the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous People on May 25th? 0. Yeah, are we surprised? Like, our current Conservative Party... Oh, yeah, bud. And honestly, like, reading Dickens is a pleasure. I'm actually, like everybody's familiar with A Christmas Carol, where the moral is the only way capitalists will even find a shred of humanity is if you terrify them with eternal damnation and death. And there's so much to know, Dave. For God's sakes, there's so much to know. Like, I always find that encountering information you haven't hit before, like, anytime I step in it, I love it. I love it when I say something incorrect or wrong and somebody checks me. Because it means I have this something to learn and I have something to sort of augment what's going on. So I just hope that when I have the pleasure of doing that, I can do it without pissing people off. Or if I do piss the people off, they're the right kind of people to piss off. Yeah, who's surprised by this, right? Conservatives, like, the modern day conservative movement here in Canada might as well be fascism. Like people like Derek Sloan, who have been, like, ejected from the Conservative caucus, right? But there's plenty of Derek Sloans in the Conservative Party. And the fact that they're voting against an act to declare the rights of Indigenous people, like, yeah, okay. Work is a trap. Spirited Away.
If you don't get
that's a big long one. I'm not going to watch that. Although I love Spirited Away. Really great movie. I'd rather live in the happiest country than the richest country. Yep. Canada's daily COVID cases now down over 70% from April at the peak of the third wave. That's good news. That's good news. Like, the hope, I think, amongst everybody is that, like, the vaccine will come in, it'll plane out, and then it'll just kind of get down to numbers that are so low that they might as well be like the flu, right? And that kind of thing. And there'll be like a regular update to the vaccine, and then it'll just sort of plane out. And lots of people, I think, are going to start saying, like, we need to get back to normal. And I'm going to be standing here being like, really? You want to get back to selling yourself to a capitalist class that abandoned you during this pandemic? Interesting. Weird decision. Yeah, that's exactly right, Dave. Like, and it's important to remember as well, like, here in Canada, like, the structure that we live under was put in place in order to service the Queen, right? It wasn't to service us, right? It was to service the Queen. That we were permitted to vote for our own representatives, but fundamentally, the representative's job was to go to the Queen, receive orders, come back and distribute those orders, right? And to, like, work with the capitalists within the structure in order to move forward with the orders from the Queen. And so now the Queen gets lopped off; she's gone, right? And she's just sort of a figurehead in the arrangement now. But all of that power just disseminates down into the Prime Minister's office, right? Our Prime Minister actually has an absurd amount of power here in Canada, and that's something that we don't talk about as Canadians. Like, if the Prime Minister decided to just start seizing territory and nationalizing stuff, there's nothing. No, there's no. They're completely allowed to do that. They're completely allowed to do that. The Prime Minister's office has an immense amount of power. And it's because all of the power of the Queen just filtered down when we declared our independence into that office. And so all of that kind of edifice still exists, where we elect a prime minister with the hope that the prime minister is doing the work for the people, but really it's just a system that's done to dictate terms downwards. Yeah, who elects our senators? Yeah, our appointed senators, right? They're appointed by the Prime Minister's office. I have a dual mind on this, on the senators being appointed, right? Because I've heard a lot of interesting arguments from all sides. Like, some people are like, no, senators should be elected by the people and represent the people. And I've also heard the other side of this, which is like, okay, well, if we appoint our senators, then that means that they become detached from the rest of the prevailing system, right? That they're not beholden to capitalists. They're not really beholden to anyone, right? They have a lifetime appointed position. And so their position actually ends up becoming very philosophical and very meta in a way, where they don't actually, like, they're not actually beholden to the Prime Minister's office any longer. After they get appointed, they can do what they want. And that's interesting. Right? And it becomes and it's kind of one of these proofs in the pudding sort of situations. Like the Senate is actually fighting to have a basic income passed in Canada. They have sent letters, and they're still sending letters to the Prime Minister's office fighting for a basic income to happen here in Canada. And like, that doesn't sound like some like unholy operation that's not working for the behest of the populace, right? Sounds to me to be the exact opposite. And so it's like, okay, interesting. So but of course, if you're on the other side of that, where you're saying like, no, our senators should be elected. We should have elected senators. They should be responsible and responsive to the populace. I completely get where you're coming from as well. So. I have a differing opinion on government there. So government's only purpose is to control and appease the masses while their value is extracting from them. A government is always a reflection of the people. That's my general opinion. Like, I have a very kind of ephemeral look at politics and government generally. And the government that is in place is typically a reflection of the people who are being governed, right? So if the people vote for a vapid, empty-headed, pretty boy with the name of a former popular prime minister in kind of a nostalgia push, well, that tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about the culture that elected him, that they're vapid, empty-headed, and nostalgic, right? And like, and naive, also quite naive in voting Justin Trudeau, right? That Trudeau comes in and he like makes weed legal. You're like, okay, cool. Are you also going to do anything else? No? Oh. No, they aren't beholden to the Prime Minister. That's what's interesting about them, right? That the Prime Minister, once they're appointed, there's no legal structure to get rid of them. They're there until they die. I mean, I'll happily look at evidence that tells me otherwise, but pandemic's end will hopefully not be anticlimactic. I don't see how it could be, Ward. Like, I think even the fact that people are going to be allowed to like connect with one another on a human kind of basic level. Like, our culture is going to go insane, dude. Like, it is. It's going to go nuts. And part of that going insane is going to be like big protest movements, big so think about like the anti-maskers, right? And how they're having protests and how they're venting and having their catharsis, right? And they're doing it in the face of this pandemic. What, you think average citizens aren't looking at that and being like, oh, about it? There's so much pent-up angst and so much pent-up anger and so much pent-up, like, sexual energy. Like, let's not forget about that. That's worth talking about. Like, pent-up is exactly the phrase. And so when you have that much pent-up energy, your society is going to go nuts. Where it's going to go, who knows? Who knows? They're there to keep the system the way it is. It's a safety mechanism to keep progressing agendas from advancing. That's the true purpose. Well, okay, but if that's true, Dave, then why is the Senate putting forward letters and asking the Canadian government to pass a basic income, right? Like, that's what I find interesting about the Senate, is that, like, what this sort of classical idea that, like, oh, if you appoint guys, they'll just be dictators and everything will be horrible and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, do we have any evidence of that, really? Not really. Like, the Senate generally their role in Canadian Parliament, in parliamentary politics, seems to have become as a double check on legislation, right? They very rarely push legislation back. And when they push legislation back, it's usually for like very minor tweaks and things like this that then pass through the Senate. Very rare that the Senate will stand up and actually blockade a bill. And then on top of that, they're also turning around and pressuring the elected officials to move forward with progressive legislation. So I just... If our system has been built on slavery, that is a criminal activity, a criminal economy. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from with that. We've never really addressed the sin of slavery in our country, and we certainly are not talking about the reality of wage slavery that exists in our society. That wage slavery is very present and obvious, very present and very obvious in our daily lives, and yet we're supposed to just completely not talk about wage slavery and like the capitalists have been getting away with saying like, no, capitalism is a system of consent. It's like, what the fuck? Like what a crazy thing to say, that like capitalism is a system of consent. That's insane. Like, what, it's a system of consent because I can go find another master, right? That's crazy. Like, I think you have to be absolutely deluded and out of your mind to pretend like capitalism is a system of consent. Like, you can go do whatever you want to do as long as the capitalists are hiring, right? It makes me suspicious of a basic income when the Senate is for it. They are oligarchs. If people do not have money, they can't profit. Yeah, there's that too. Senate, if they were pop stars, could influence narratives. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, Jeff. I just think that the Senate, like, the basic income is just a reform to capitalism, and ultimately the capitalists will pass a basic income not from the goodness of their hearts, but because they'll have no other options. That the other options are literally going to be military repression on like a large scale, massive kind of situation. So they're just going to do it because they'll get desperate, right? They're not going to do it because they'll be like, this is the right thing to do. This might be what they'll say. They might be like, this is the right thing to do for Canadians. Canada needs to move forward into a new digitized future and industrializing where there's disruption and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to move forward together. Oh, hold on. I'm being kind of a weenie. Let me do it the Justin Trudeau way. And we, as Canadians, need to move forward together. That's Justin Trudeau right there. That's my best Justin Trudeau. And and they'll say that, but the truth is that they'll just be out of options. They won't know what else to do because capitalism doesn't have ideas. It doesn't have thoughts. It's not innovative. It's the best thing that capitalists can do is just buy the ideas that people have, right? And so this is a long form way of me saying, like, everything you think about the Senate, I think I agree with, but everything that other people are saying about the Senate, I kind of also agree with, and that it's just this crazy mixed bag of total nonsense. Yeah, that's exactly right, Dave. The Luddite revolts had nothing to do with machines taking jobs. It was about losing our ability to be self-sufficient on the common lands. Yeah, it's an obsolete ideology. It's and like, yeah, the loss of connection to the land over the industrial period is a pretty big deal. Like, we've gotten really disconnected from the land. Hey Drew, how you doing? Hey John, not sure if you got the memo, but we're scheduled to be full SA members tonight. Thought I'd let you know. Okay. Send my love. Sorry, bud. I do this. Looks like they're going to attempt the military tactics first, where homeless people are concerned. Looks like they're going to attempt the military tactics first, where homeless people are concerned. Yeah. They always do. Like, that's the big thing, Olive. Like, they always do, right? To whatever degree. And a lot of it comes down to, like, we have plenty of examples throughout the world where the leadership attempts to use the military force to quell dissent, and the military refuses. So the military refuses to open fire on its own citizenry. And when that happens, that's the end of it, right? Because once the prevailing government... That's why, like, when Doug Ford tried to give fascist authoritarian powers to the police in order to deal with this pandemic, and the police said no, that's essentially the end of his credibility as a leader, right? Like, that moment there, if that's not continuously brought up on the campaign trail, then I don't know what these campaigners are thinking, right? Like, Doug Ford tried to turn us into a police state, right? And the police forces said no. That's it. It's over, right? He has no credibility. And yet he still seems to have support of 1 in 4 Ontarians, which is gross to me. Yeah, we're not asking you to storm the beaches of Normandy, Saskatchewan tells vaccination holdouts. Yeah. People do treat it like it's this, like, overwhelming, aggressive kind of thing. Central to Trader Joe's corporate image is the idea that is vaguely progressive alternative to corporate grocery chains. But my time working at Trader Joe's during the COVID-19 pandemic exposed how little the chain cared about the safety of workers like me. Yeah. They don't give a shit. It's all performative, right? They'll put up anything, like, if they can put up signs or, like, plastic barriers or whatever to, like, soothe the angst and anxiety of the workers, they will, even if they're completely ineffective, even if they don't matter at all, right? That's been my experience. Yeah, the police sweeps of tent cities and containing of homeless people, yeah. And notice that when they do police sweeps of tent cities, they're doing sweeps of places that they're doing sweeps of places that are in commercial districts, right? They're leaving places that are in sort of poor neighborhoods alone, and they're sweeping through commercial districts so that the rich people don't have to see them, right? They need to make these invisible. That's the whole point. I think it's scary when the police have more power than the premier. What happens when it's a progressive premier and they refuse orders? Our police, well, and our police are overfunded, right? Like Ontario police budget comparison graph. Is this what I'm looking for? StatCan. Give me the graph. Give me the graph. Average amount spent on salary, wages, police officers, civilians. Right? So there's your police officers. Always huge. Always huge. Civilians. Like, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are just off the chain, right? Just absolutely outrageous. So, like, Toronto City... Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Toronto City budget pie chart. Oh, come on, you guys. Don't do this to me. Don't bury it. I want to see it. I want to see it. Ugh, always with the burying. The burying. Okay. Can't really see it here. That's... Can I just open this in a new window? No. Okay. Boo. Now we're taking way too much time. Now we're taking way too much time to find this chart, so I'll sing out loud so that you'll be entertained. Hey, hey. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Okay, here we go. This is a good one. This does it. Here you go. Police service and board. So, not quite double, but like definitely like 40% more than the TTC. And I think that's a really good indicator of like what we're talking about, right? The TTC, like, that's a huge institution, right? And we couldn't function as a city without the TTC. But then the city, like the police budget, is just outrageous. Take a look, compare it to fire services even. Like, and there's your shelter support, housing administration, right? Parks. And you kind of think, well, what would it look if you lopped that off and you put it into this, right? Boink. Not even like to like, not even going down like to this level, but like here. Doink, take that and attach it over here. Or how about, where's education? Toronto Public Health. Look at Toronto Public Health. So like, this is so overblown. It's so overblown. It's absolutely absurd. And every city looks like this. Every city, every province, every Canada looks like this. The United States looks like this. I think like the United States their police forces are literally like the third most well-funded military force or armed force on the planet. It's literally like the American military, the Chinese military, the American police forces. So this is troubling, right? Troubling. We should be troubled by that to a pretty significant degree. The exponential trends that Tony Saban talks about are happening across every value chain in our society. The convergence of AI and autonomous platforms is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. Yeah, I think that's true. Like people don't really know what's going to happen with any of this AI stuff, right? Like it's just suddenly going to pop up, and people are going to be like, "Oh, what? That's how I'm going to be." I'm going to be like, "Oh, what? What are you talking about?" Like, I'm glad that there are people talking about it, but oh yeah, I'm Dave. I'm a huge 9/11, a former 9/11 truther. I can have that conversation if you'd like. I don't go too deep on it because Noam Chomsky really got me off of that. Because like, Chomsky said, well, let's say that Bush did 9/11. Like, let's say that he's guilty of it. Let's say that we could even prove it. Let's say that we could actually have evidence that links him to the 9/11 terror attacks, and that he knew and that he allowed it to happen, or that he even planned it. So Bush and Cheney and that group are guilty of war crimes on the face of it. Like, they lied about the WMD, the Iraq War, right? Like, we have evidence of those things. We saw them do it. Like, why? Who cares about 9/11 from that perspective? And I'm like, that was a real wake-up call for me. That it was just like, oh yeah, like, instead of spending all our energy talking about 9/11, we should talk about things that, like, we can prove and are in front of us. Because, like, the Bush administration, all of those guys should have gone to The Hague, right? They're guilty of major war crimes, and the result is the militarization of the police. You're absolutely right about that. 9/11. I love the 9/11 trutherism, man. I can get pretty deep into that. If you have enough money, you can buy your way to the top. When you're young, you think you can accomplish anything through hard work. When you get older, you realize life is like a pay-to-win mobile game with in-app purchases. Yeah. That's got a lot of accuracy to it. By the way, guys, if you're listening and you haven't subscribed, how many people are in here right now? 8. If you haven't subscribed, just leave a subscribe. Patreon down below. Oh, yeah. I know exactly how you feel. I had to wear a mask in Home Depot once. Yeah. I do think that it is, like, one of the things... I made that video in response to the National Post article, but I think that this is unfortunate. Like, it's deeply unfortunate that there is a rising anti-Semitic attitude. And it's completely, though, because our power structures are not in their pursuit to act as apologists for Zionists, they're using these sorts of people as a shield and putting them in the line of fire instead of agreeing with the base complaint, which is that Zionism is a problem, right? It is a problem. Obviously, it's a problem. And if they actually cared about these people, they would do that. They would create the distinction. And I think that that would quell a lot of this kind of anti-Semitic upswinging that is happening, and it's undeniable. But the people in power don't care about that. They care about maintaining the Israeli state and using these people as fodder in that fight. That's nice. Put that as a sticker. Oh, Kids in the Hall confirming filming is underway in Toronto. Ba, 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 ba. If you want some good like Kids in the Hall style sketch comedy, Baroness Von Sketch Show is really, really good. It's a group of 4 women who did a bunch of great sketches and really, really good. Kind of Kids in the Hall-esque sort of stuff. There is no organization called Antifa. Antifa stands for anti-fascism. World War II veterans were Antifa because they fought fascism. Anyone who's against fascism is Antifa. There is no membership card. Anyone can be Antifa. Everyone should be Antifa. Antifa. Yep. Toronto Path stabber denied conditional discharge. Yeah, don't be stabbing people, please. In February this year, the CPC announced the elimination of extreme poverty in China. These exclusive episodes gave us an inside look to the CPC's poverty elimination campaign. Cool. You do wonder about the accuracy. Like, what litmus are they using? All right, this is too much. I can't. Too big a story. Worth looking at though, so I am going to save it. Save, and I might actually, if you guys just give me a second. Thank you so much for your patience while I get my stuff together. Get my stuff together to defeat the Huns. Did you send me daughters when I asked? Oh, I shouldn't sing that. Maybe YouTube will ping me and be like, oh no, you're a copyright. Jeez. Enough is enough. Canadian news organizations file legal action for press freedom at Fairy Creek. The Narwhal. Good story for the Narwhal. Canadian Association of Journalists, along with the coalition of news organizations, are demanding RCMP ensure journalists fair access to demonstrations. Oh, okay, I think I know what this story's about. Yeah, so there's Fairy Creek. There's a lot of protests going on. Yeah, more than 4 people have been arrested this month in an ongoing civil disobedience action that include chaining themselves to forestry bridges. We have documented reports from numerous journalists who have been refused entry to the area through broad use of exclusion zones. Like, you don't want journalists to come in and actually take a look at what you're doing? Sounds suspicious. In April, forestry company Teal Jones obtained a court injunction to allow the arrest and removal of protesters. The RCMP subsequently set up an exclusionary zone. Yeah. No, there should be journalists in there. The idea that they are excluding journalism from happening is very, very questionable. One might even say fascist. No, you got to let journalists do their thing and actually report on what's actually happening. Yep, when the rich rob the poor, it's called business. When the poor fight back, it's called violence. Don't get me wrong, I love coffee, but if you're forced to work in an environment where you have to neglect sleep, exercise, and healthy eating in order to stay productive, then maybe it's a tool that better serves those who exploit workers. Well, yeah, the UN doesn't have any teeth. I actually wish that, like the problem with the UN is that the United States has veto power, right? That's the problem. And, like, yeah, the police are openly right-wing. I mean, you know, they wear these... They wear badges like the thin blue line or like the Punisher symbol, like this sort of stuff. Some of them even get away with wearing like Nazi symbols, some of the lesser known Nazi symbols, right? Like it's absolutely brutal. Sparks shut down nuclear weapons facility over de-skilling.
Tingley Point. NG Bailey's Balfours want to take away a lot of the electricians' work. It's the work we do at the start of the job, the containment. Callie's all the cables is a very important part of the job. NG Bailey's Balfours want to train guys 8-week courses to do this work. They won't be able to learn it in a few weeks. It's got to be done properly, and you learn it over a couple of years. You don't learn it over a couple of weeks.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so what they're doing is they're trying to just pretend as though they can put them through like a 2-week thing and then have them go do the job. And these guys are saying that's not how this is going to work. Like, you cannot learn this in just a couple of weeks and then do it. And it's at a nuclear weapons facility, for God's sakes. Like, yeah, would you like those things to be built properly? Yeah. Especially if you're like standing beside one, drilling into one, right? All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profane. That's a pretty cool poster, actually. I rather like that. Communist Manifesto, the Antifa comic book. That's right. You get Hitler. Yeah. Israel and the media. I love it when people put on like just nice photos, just nice shots. I wonder how they got this one. Probably a drone. Yeah, that's a drone shot for sure. Lovely shot, though. Ooh, Hockey Night in Canada broadcaster under fire after making apparent homophobic joke on live TV. Oh, boy. I won't dig too deep into that, but sometimes people do just say stupid things because they're just trying to fill space. They're just trying to fill time, and so they end up saying something dumb. You know? And especially in this era where, like, you can say things that are, like, there's a big issue going on right now where, like, the purpose of comedy is to live on the edge between what is or is not socially acceptable, right? That's kind of the purpose of comedy, and that it's constantly pushing wherever it can to find out where the humor lies, right? And to discuss like bigger social issues within kind of quote unquote the safe space of comedy. And you know, and sometimes people reach for it and they miss. It really is that simple. Sometimes people reach for the kind of that comedic line, which is very special and or very it's very fine, and you whiff, you miss, right? So I kind of wish we were more forgiving on those lines. Like, I think it's fine for people to stand up and be like, hey man, kind of homophobic, but I also wish that people were a little bit more willing to accept an apology, right? Like, I do think that there have been people who have done exactly as I've described, where they put their foot in it, and then they've turned around and been like, my bad, like, I was just trying to be funny, I was just trying to find the humor, right? And I whiffed, and it didn't work. And I wish that people were more readily able to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Like, you know, I didn't appreciate it, but I appreciate that you're apologizing, and I understand your reasoning for it. Like, I wish that was more the way the conversation happened. But it does seem like if somebody accidentally makes a slip or they try to do something and it doesn't quite work, it's like we want to obliterate them completely, that they become, like, they need to be banished from the society forever. I'm just like, that's not healthy. That just doesn't sound healthy. Yeah, saying what people are pissed off about in real people words makes people laugh, yeah. I love when they say God says it's a sin. Really? Where? Yeah, there's a bit of that. Paying my monthly rent that's tripled since 2001 with my paycheck that's the same dollar amount my dad was making in 1993, then opening the newspaper and reading stories about why no one has kids anymore. Yeah. This, to me, is the number one tactic that needs to be used against conservatives, right? That, let's be straight, right? Conservatives are largely older, white people, and we genuinely need to start saying to these guys, like, you will not have grandchildren. Like, you're just not going to have grandchildren if you keep voting this way. If you keep supporting these guys, you just will not have grandchildren. And it needs to be that firm. And, like, just got to start talking to these, like, got to start talking to these conservatives like they're children, right? Like, because they are in many ways. They're just kids who never grew up. And we just got to start looking at them and just telling them what the facts are, and not doing it in like a whingy kind of complaining way. Just literally being like, well, if you keep voting for people who keep making it more and more expensive to live, I'm not going to be able to have kids. Do you want grandchildren? Stop voting conservative. Just exactly say it like that. Like, no exasperation, no anger, no nothing. Just literally like, oh, you're a kid who doesn't know anything about the world. Well, if you keep voting for people who keep making our lives more and more expensive, and if you keep supporting people who keep making our lives more and more expensive, I'm not going to be able to afford to have kids. So why are you doing that? It's very, very straightforward in my view. The global wealth tax idea and global carbon tax should split for the UN, ICC, and other UN organizations, especially refugees and aid. I want some more to go to climate-affected and poor countries. The UN doesn't have teeth partially because of money, perhaps replace permanent members too. Well, and they don't have a military, right? Like, and that's the way the conversation's been going for the last long while, right? Like, and the US has veto power, so like, I do think the UN is super important because it does allow a degree of conversation to occur. It is diplomacy, right? And diplomacy is important. And the UN has released powerful documents. Their report on the sanctions that have been going on by the Americans, in my view, completely decimated the whole look at Venezuela narrative. Notice how these guys aren't saying look at Venezuela anymore. Notice how no right-wingers are like look at Venezuela. How that doesn't come up in conversation any longer. And it's literally because you can pull up a UN report and just put it in front of them and be like, read a fucking book. So many people are checking out, buying a van, getting into the country, yeah. Well, because there's no organization, right? There's no actual organization that they can get into any longer, right? They don't have any system to actually, like, connect into any longer, and they see that they're being abandoned, and they don't know where to go, and they don't know what to do. So yeah, of course. And that's going to get worse, by the way. Like, these tent cities are going to get bigger. More and more people are going to just do what they can to try and get out of the city situation. I mean, they're still attempting to destroy Venezuela, right? Like, Again, I think this ties in, like, logically it doesn't make sense, but since when has the United States military operated on logic, right? They're highly racist. They're highly tied in. Like, they like to pretend like they're rational actors working exclusively for economic reasons, but white supremacy counts, right? They want to destroy Venezuela because Venezuela fought back against the white owners, right? And sure, they'd like the oil resource, like, absolutely, but they want to get in there and seek vengeance on them. I suspect that the United States military will invade Venezuela at some point, and they'll lose, because the United States military is a husk of what it formerly was. Yeah, I don't know what the video is about, but it's called Advice to Young People as They Face Annihilation. That title is funny because it's scary truth. Yeah. The government is making it impossible for people to park their vans anywhere or permits to park anywhere. Yeah. Well, yeah. They don't want people decoupling or decentralizing from the system, right? The grocery worker. Scheduled just under the number of hours to qualify for minimum benefits. Frontline punching bag for Karens and boomers. Grocery companies have record profits, but they coordinated nationally to cut $2 an hour hero pay. Have to explain why prices are rising with rising profits without ever being told why your wages are lowering. Yeah, it's stuff like this that's like, it's becoming too obvious. Like, and it's going to get more obvious that our system is failing. Like, it's in total free fall collapse. Exxon loses board seats to activist hedge fund in blow to oil giant strategy. Yeah. All right, good. Screw these guys, right? Under COVID-19, the number of Torontonians applying for social housing as a refuge from domestic violence has soared. Yeah. Like, you tell people to go home and live in a space with this other person who they only really were seeing occasionally in the first place because capitalism kept them apart. And then you increase the amount of stress, the amount of economic stress, the amount of difficulty that these people are going through. What do you think is going to happen? Alcoholism is, like, alcohol consumption has soared. What else is soaring right now? Like, alcohol consumption has soared. Opioid deaths, suicide, right? Yeah, of course domestic violence is also soaring, right? Your society is in free fall collapse, and there are no systems being put in place to recover from capitalism. And in fact, the systems that are being put in place are entrenching capitalism into our system through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which I talk about all the time. Here's another darkly funny title. 3 years ago, now playing perspectives on the pandemic, blood clots, and beyond. That's pretty funny. Just as Jacques Fresco predicted, only now it's going to hit the white-collar workers. 80,000 accountants and bookkeepers who have been let go due to a single AI accountant. Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. Like, the level of disruptions that technology is going to bring to us, and it's going to be unexpected, right? That the fields that it happens to, people are going to be like, what's happening even, right? Because we don't actually have a media. That's part of it, right? That the media really only operates on behest of the billionaire class. And this is actually something really interesting that's happening, is that corporate media across the board, including Fox, okay? Corporate media across the board is losing ratings in huge ways. Ratings have declined significantly to the point where, like, on like CNN and MSNBC, they're only getting like 150,000 people watching their primetime shows. That's like less than Joe Rogan gets, right? Like, so these people are like, these institutions are losing their influence in big ways, and it is because they refuse to actually report on billionaires, and they refuse to report on anything involving billionaires, while the billionaires are literally the only story anybody wants to hear, right? Because the billionaires are so all-encompassing, they're so influential, they're so infected into everything that we do, they're the only story anybody wants to hear about, and the media refuses to report on it. So literally the only story that anyone has any interest in, the demand that exists, is not being supplied. And I think that's being reflected in my subscriber count. My subscriber count is going, and I think it's going to go, which, by the way, tell your friends about me. Tell your friends all about me. The next 10 years are going to be more disruptive than the arrival of the first industrial revolution. You're probably right about that. And hopefully our society is to a place where we don't accept the level of violence that happened during the first industrial revolution. Yeah. Aaron O'Toole's appeal to working class voters is a smokescreen. For sure it is. Like, Aaron O'Toole's whole game is obfuscation and smoke screening, right? Like, he doesn't have anything else. That if he actually spoke the way that his constituents spoke, we would be like, you're a repugnant fascist, because the party is full of repugnant fascists. Like, Aaron O'Toole's going to do a good job, though, of appearing statesmanly while espousing some of the most reprehensible doctrine you've ever heard in your life. Support is growing for a universal basic income, and rightly so. Yeah. One of the biggest myths is that billionaires are job creators. 1999, 50 billionaires, 4.3 unemployment rate. 2019, 607 billionaires, 3.7 unemployment rate. Now, 719 billionaires, 6.1 unemployment rate. In the pandemic, billionaire wealth grew by 55%, while the number of jobs dropped 5%. Yeah. Billionaires don't do anything. Like, they're just boils on the side of the society. They siphon away wealth, and we've just allowed them to do it. Despite dire predictions, fewer than 5% of Toronto businesses have gone bust. But what happens when government aid is cut off? Which is going to happen, right? These capitalists are so stupid and idiotic and bloodthirsty that they're going to try to revert back to neoliberal economics after all of this happens. Even though it's been completely discredited, even though everybody knows it doesn't work, they're going to try it anyway. And so eventually there'll come a point where they just cut aid off to these businesses, and then everybody goes back tits up because nobody can actually afford to exist, because guess what? Nobody has any money. Blinken claims U.S. money to Palestine, Syrian elections. Okay. Researchers tracked nearly 150 charges against Ontario police officers since 2005. Most ended in acquittal or withdrawn charges. Yeah, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. Difference between a brown person killing people and a white person killing people. Stop politicizing Texas shooting. 27 people have lost their lives. This is not about politics or skin color. This is about evil versus good. New York terrorist turns out to be a 29-year-old migrant from Uzbekistan who worked as an Uber driver. Time for extreme vetting. Yep, if you're brown, time for extreme vetting. If you're white, this is about evil versus good. Interesting. Yeah, I've seen this. Ask nothing of the wealthy or their corporations, and they will eventually create a society in which all prosper. Yeah, wealth, Panama account. Instead of fruitlessly waiting for wealth to trickle down, beat the rich with blunt instruments until the gold flows. The slow timeline for fitness club reopening has created an underground dispensary model for the rich. Yeah. Steak $48, $100 per person. There is a $100 per person food or beverage minimum for each person at your table. Yeah. Just... Ooh, Canada announces plans to land a rover on the moon. We did it. We're gonna do it, guys. We're gonna also do moon things for reasons. I think that's completely ridiculous, by the way. Like, the narrative that people like Elon Musk are using about how we'll get to Mars and set up a colony and that'll somehow save humanity and all this. It's just this, like, delusional utopian pipe dream that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, the idea that during a period of, like, mass civil unrest, enormous unemployment, a pandemic, we're like, why do this right now? Like, could you maybe feed and shelter people? Isn't that something we should be doing? Waterloo LRT. Hold on. Sounds like Seth Rogen's laugh. Is that the sound that's coming off that thing? That's hilarious. It does sound like Seth Rogen's laugh. That's so funny. Landlords always try to negotiate with tenants individually rather than through a tenant union because they know tenants working together are stronger. So it's no surprise landlords are refusing to recognize tenant unions and work on solutions to benefit all tenants.
Under the Residential Tenancies Act, tenants have the right to form and be members of a tenant union, those who represent their collective interests. Landlords know tenants are powerful when organized, and so try to negotiate with tenants individually. But right now, there is no legal obligation on landlords to recognize tenant unions or to engage with them in any way. What tenants want is to be able to negotiate through a tenant union on solutions that apply to all tenants in the building.
Yeah. We should just get rid of these landlords. Like, just get rid of them. They had their chance, right? They've proven to be slumlords across the board. Like, they're total shitbags every single time. They're not good people. They're just not. Get rid of them. Wait till they figure out how many people are not going to work for them anymore. Yeah, that's really true, Dave. Like, I think that there's a lot of... Well, and part of it is, like, people were one missed paycheck away from insolvency in the first place. The pandemic hit. People went insolvent because they were abandoned en masse. And they are, yeah, they're, as you say, they're not going to come back. Because they can't. Because they went insolvent, so they left, right? They moved away. They don't live in the neighborhood anymore. They couldn't afford the rent. They left, right? So yeah, they're not going to be rushing back to work for a $750 an hour flipping a burger. Like, fuck that. And I think there's a lot of that going on. I think like lots and lots of people are just like I would prefer to like literally be on the street than deal with this McDonald's bullshit anymore, you know? Yes, they will send all of the homeless, poor, and disabled to Mars. Well, and Elon Musk has actually said outright, Ruth, that one of the ways that he wants to have people pay their way to get to Mars is by taking out a loan from him, and then they'll send him, and then they can work it off when they goes to Mars. And it, literally, people have been like, that's indentured servitude, what you're explaining. Like, that's what we did to people going over from Europe to North America. That's indentured servitude that you're explaining. Like, what? No. Let's be real about Musk's plan. It's all about the minerals on Mars and the ability to mine asteroids. They just want to privatize space and bring capitalism to Mars. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, woe be to us if they found, like, big oil deposits on an asteroid or something, right? Yeah, it is mainly about resources and, like, finding, like, imagine if they found huge lithium deposits on Mars, right? Like, jeez. Yeah, the whole idea of, like, creating a paradise for humans, that's total fucking bullshit. Like, this is the richest human being on the planet, and you think freeloaders in the country are the poor? Yeah, Jeff Bezos could give all Amazon workers $100,000 and still be as rich as pre-COVID. Senate preparing $10 billion bailout fund for Jeff Bezos' space firm. Yeah. Damn you, bourgeoisie. Yeah. People are making deals with elderly homeowners to set up farms on their backyards and living off the profits all over the place. Half acre of organic... Well, and I actually think, like, any green space that exists in the cities are going to have to be converted. Right? I think that is going to have to happen. The people that supply the micro farm industry can't keep up to the tool demand. That's cool to know. Yeah, like every single green patch that you see is going to be converted into farmland. And we're going to start to decentralize a lot of that kind of stuff, I hope. I am forced to purchase health insurance from a corporation for hundreds of dollars a month, and then that corporation takes a large percentage of that money and gives it to politicians so that they will legislate against universal health care. This is extortion. Alberta to lift all COVID restrictions by early July. Okay. We'll see how that goes. People like Kenny and Ford are ultimately just going to bank on the veracity of the vaccine. That's really what they're banking on. You want that meme? What, this one? Take a screenshot. You can find it on our Late Stage Capitalism. Got a hilarious letter from my insurer telling me the healthcare provider handling my procedure next week is indeed in network, but I should make sure every individual I come into contact with during my procedure is in network, just to avoid surprise bills. Like, how annoying. How annoying it must be to live in such a society. Yeah, how Israel shields itself with the smear of anti-Semitism. Yeah. I'm really surprised that the person who was a Delaware senator for 35 years and spent his whole career defending banks and credit card companies to the point of making it harder to discharge debt in personal bankruptcies wasn't sincere in his pledge to cancel student debt. Well, Ward, then what's the difference between that and a general strike, right? Like, if people just walk away from the jobs, like if they just walk away from McDonald's, they just walk away, like that's as good as a general strike, right? And actually, I would actually say that that's more terrifying for McDonald's. How terrifying would it be if literally you could not get anybody to work your job, right? As a capitalist, that you have like invested and erected this whole machine, and literally everybody goes, no, right? At least with a general strike, there's the idea that we're negotiating, right? At least with the general strike, it's like, oh, there's my workers. There they are. They're on the picket lines. They're striking. I can see them. They just want X or Y, right? And if I give a concession, which maybe I will, or like all that, they'll come back. But that's not what they're facing. They're literally facing like, well, where's the workers? Well, okay, I'll raise my wages. Where's the workers? What do you mean nobody wants to? What do you mean? And it's just over. That's way scarier for those guys. That's way scarier. What do I think about the Great Reset? I think that that is a propaganda narrative that is being used to prepare people for the disruptions that they are going to experience that you talk about, Dave. That the Great Reset, these nations understand that there is going to be major disruption. They know it's going to happen. And so if they can create a phrase that embeds into the minds of the average citizen that what we're going through is a great reset, and convince them that, and just like they sold trickle-down economics. They sold trickle-down economics as if it was going to be a benefit for everybody. Oh, it's totally fine that that billionaire is getting billions of dollars because that money's going to trickle down to you and everyone's going to do better, right? Yeah. So Great Reset has built within it the idea that like, oh, we're going to have a great reset and that's going to be good for you because there's this, that, and the other thing. When in reality, it's just a way for them to cover the fact that they're trying to erect a neo-feudal structure. Like the structure of the society is now neo-feudal here in Canada. It's actually official now. Like the existence of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank means that we are all neo-feudal serfs. And that's official. You might as well write it down. You might as well write it in the history books already. We have officially sold ourselves to a neo-feudal structure because of the erection of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. And that's very straightforward, right, in my view. Like, we've entrenched capital into our governmental system. We've made it so that we are no longer going to take money away from the capitalists in order to fund infrastructure projects. Instead, we'll loan it. They'll loan it to us and we'll pay them back and then also give them interest. So any wealth that we have, like they've got all this wealth, we've got a little bit of this wealth. So they'll loan us some, we'll get something built, we'll give them that money back, so they'll always have it, right? And then we'll take a little bit of the wealth that we have and give it to them as well. So you can see how over time this procedure leaves us with nothing and them with everything. And of course that collapses the whole system. And how does it collapse the whole system? Well, it collapses into neo-feudalism. Yeah, it really is a dog and pony show. Like it's and I don't really like. We should pay attention to what they're saying so that we understand the propaganda and we understand all that. But their actions are what tell us what they're interested in. Like the erection of this Canada Infrastructure Bank. Like Justin Trudeau's a fascist, black and white. like black and white. He's not interested in moving towards any kind of socialist or communist idea or any kind of even progressive idea, right? He is a fascist, and like in the most technical way. And if he didn't want to be a fascist, then he should stop acting like he should stop erecting fascist institutions. Well, it is actually not fair. Sorry, I am going to backpedal on that a little bit. It's not fair to call Justin Trudeau a fascist, but he's a liberal, right? And liberals ultimately kowtow to fascism, right? Every single time fascism rises in power and fascism asserts itself, liberals bend the knee, right? That's what liberals do, because ultimately liberals exist primarily to protect capital. Their method of protecting capital is through negotiation and secession, right, to socialists and communists, through piecemeal reform. But anytime the fascists and the socialists clash, the liberals side with the fascists. Every time. And without exception. There's not been a single exception. Yeah, I think I may have overstepped my bounds. I think he's just a liberal, right? We're just realizing that liberalism is actually bad, right? That liberalism is actually as bad as conservatism, right? We're just steadily realizing as a society that, like, being a liberal is not much better than being a conservative. How many multi-generational homes will happen like immigrants always did because of this? Yeah. No one has anywhere to live and working is baseless. Yeah. Yeah. Last summer, Ford promised air conditioning in long-term care home rooms. That hasn't happened. Long-term care ministry says it's working with sector to have adequate cooling systems in place this summer, which won't happen. The long-term care grift that's been going on since Mike Harris is a crime. It's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against our society. Mike Harris should go to jail, and Doug Ford is attempting to do the same thing, which is privatize long-term care homes and then sit on the board of directors of those privatized long-term care homes, diminish services, diminish quality of life, to the point where, like, people are dying of dehydration because they can't get a glass of water, right? Like, that kind of shit is happening in these long-term care homes. You can read the military report. The military went in because of the pandemic and outright was just like, these places are shitholes. And it's 100% because Mike Harris wants to steal money from the system so that he can do nothing, be pointless. He should go to jail. So should Doug Ford for trying to do the same thing. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Dave. I think that the NDP right now are in this really weird, shaky moment, right? Where they're having an identity crisis, and that identity crisis is happening because lots and lots of people are flowing and flooding into the NDP to push them to the left. And I think that I think you're right in regards to, like, the central organizers, right? The people who are, like, the leadership and at the top. I think ultimately they do subscribe to neoliberal models, but their base is starting to really push them on the left. And you've got groups, organizations. Oh, here's a great opportunity for me to say to everybody, if you want to get politically organized, right, the thing to do is to go to third-party, non-affiliated political organizations like Socialist Action, which is the organization that I'm a part of, like Socialist Action, like Marxist.ca is another one, Acorn, right? Because what happens is you put your weight behind them, right? And they go in and you all vote as a block, right? So instead of you as an individual going into the NDP and being like, here's my $5, and they go, thanks, and then they ignore you, right? You give your $5 to this organization instead, and then they move in. And when you have big blocks that can vote, that means that you can start putting people in positions of power. You can start taking over the party, right? Which is how Jagmeet Singh became the leader of the NDP. He just brought more people because fundamentally, politics is a numbers game, right? That sure, it has this existential quality and it is a reflection of the society and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, if they come with 100 people and you come with 1,000 people, you win. And it is as clean as that. Yet sure, they can start to like manipulate and all that, so if the race is close, they can like bump themselves up a little bit or all that kind of stuff, right? Suppress voters, all that. You can have that conversation, but the truth is black and white, and it's true across any political system you want to talk about. If they bring 100 people and you bring 1,000 people, you win, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. Go into these third-party, non-affiliated organizations, because you don't want to negotiate on a one-to-one basis with the NDP, because that's how they just ignore you, or the Liberals, that's how they ignore you, any of that. You want to go in as a block. And if you walk into the NDP leadership convention or the policy convention, right, and they walk in with 100 people saying, like, I don't know about that basic income thing, and you walk in with 1,000 people saying, basic income now, well, basic income now, right? And if the leadership doesn't actually acknowledge that you're taking over their party and start to work with that, then when a leadership convention happens, guess what happens? He's gone, these guys elect their own person, and then these guys are the leaders of the party, and you're told to go slag off, right? So this is how you do politics. You join a third-party, non-affiliated organization, you go in as blocks, you attempt to take the party over as much as you possibly can, and if you're a big enough organization, the leadership in the party will talk to you and will adopt what you have to say, because they know that if they don't, they will be booted, right? And this is where the terror comes for the neoliberals, because if enough of us get together and actually take a political party like the NDP over and make it an actual socialist or an actual communist party, then the capitalists are fucked. Because if a guy stands on the national stage and starts saying, why are we working for these capitalists in the first place? People are going to vote for that guy. Yeah, for sure they are. So, I live for the day we hold politicians accountable for the actions. Oh, I would love... Don't you wish that we could send all of these, like, American presidents to The Hague? Right? The Hague has already declared the United States a rogue terrorist state. Right? I would love to see, like, George W. Bush, Biden, like, Clinton, like, all of these people. They should go to The Hague. I would applaud for that day. Absolutely. Send these guys to The Hague. Put them on trial for war crimes. Hang them. Right? We absolutely should. It must have been so exhilarating living in Italy when they hung Mussolini. That must have been so exhilarating for them. I hope a similar thing happens in our lifetime. Politics is a game of opinions, yeah, not evidence. If man is going to save ourselves, science needs to make the decision based on evidence, not political opinions. But that's a change in people's perception of what matters, right? And that gets into some really interesting, like, Athenian, Grecian democracy stuff. That you can't discard people's emotions and how they feel about a subject. And so the Greeks were really good at using emotional arguments as well as evidence, right? And combining those two things together in order to present argument, right? Which is why the capitalist class has assaulted the humanities so effectively. They don't need citizens who understand how to talk to humans. They don't need that kind of stuff. We need a climate alliance between the Green and the NDP. I'm currently withholding my donation to the NDP until they agree to cooperate with the Greens. Does socialists? I don't know if socialist action gives a 75% tax credit. I don't know about that. You should ask them yourself. They'll answer you pretty quickly. There will not be an alliance between the Greens and the NDP. That's not going to happen. It's just not. The Green Party has a socialist insurrection brewing already. It does. Yeah, it does. It was successfully quelled this last time. It might not be so successful next time. What's your opinion on the DSC? I don't know what the DSC is, Chris. Yeah, both have an insurrection brewing, thankfully. I think it's going to be more successful in the NDP than it is going to be in the Greens. And I think that's because more people are going to go to the NDP. And there's more effort being put towards the NDP because the NDP has already made major inroads into the Orange Wave itself that happened in Quebec means that more people are going to go towards the NDP than the Greens. The Greens are very small. They don't have a lot of power. They have the people they have, and honestly now with the election of Annamie Paul, there's a lot of big question marks surrounding that party and where their allegiances lie and what they're actually interested in doing, and we'll see what happens to the Greens under Annamie Paul. I wouldn't be too surprised though, because she doesn't even have a seat. Right? I won't be too surprised to see that this next election results in not many gains by the Greens, and they'll have another leadership convention. We'll see what happens from there. The Democratic Socialists of Canada. I have no opinion. I don't know enough about them. So, I like that they have the word socialist in their name, but I've become quite skeptical of lots of organizations that call themselves communist or socialist because it's a common practice for capitalists to co-opt organizations in order to kill them. Right? I believe that the Communist Party of Canada here in Toronto has been completely bought by capitalists. That they just own the name so that there can never be a Communist Party of Canada, right? So it's pretty common. How long is this? Too long. Richard Wolff is the preeminent scholar on Marxism in North America. I don't think there's anybody in North America that's doing a better job of moving forward Marxism as an idea. And it is because he speaks with such clarity. He understands the subject matter and he understands how to communicate the subject matter to just like an uneducated person who doesn't know anything about what's going on. And he's also very honest, which I love about him. Here's a video where he's doing Marx's flaws, and Marx does have flaws. Early Marxism. Chris Hedges says that Marx was a utopian, that Marx's critique of capitalism is brilliant, but that his solutions are utopian. And I think that's accurate, right? And I wouldn't be too surprised to see Wolff mention the same thing. But what do you expect? Marx was a theoretical, right? He had no power or basis by which to work from. He was just sort of theory crafting, and it makes complete sense that a guy who was accurately critiquing the system he was in would turn around and be like, okay, well, I think maybe this, maybe that. But he's really just sort of pulling stuff out of the air, and things get tried and things work and things don't, right? Really is that simple. And of course, Western capitalists like to take a look at the attempts and failings of communism and pretend as though those failings are enough to eradicate the project completely. When the reality is no, the goal of communism is to try things, acknowledge if they fail, and then stop doing them. And the Soviets had plenty of that kind of stuff where they tried to do things, they didn't work out, so they stopped doing them. And so have the Chinese, right? The Chinese Communist Party has completely tried things, been like, nope, that's not working, and so they've stopped, right? Whereas Western Canada, Western capitalism, right? Because everything's just free market nonsense, they just invisibilize the failures, right? And of course, if your failure does get any kind of press or any kind of thing, you're just a lazy about loser who you need to get out of the system, and that's fine. So, Professor Wolff, I really, really recommend. I'm going to upvote this right away because he's an important and powerful figure in the communist movement today.
How did you even...
I just heard a political ad on my local radio station out of Kingston. Ontario. It was paid for by the Ontario PC Party with the whole 30-second spot, which is bashing Trudeau Liberals' COVID policies. Yeah, focusing on the federal Liberals, they have to. They have no alternative, right? They know, like, the Ford administration knows that that people, the perception of the people is that the Ford administration fumbled the ball during COVID. They know it, right? And they know the polls are showing it. Everybody's opinion is showing it. So they have to do something, right? They can't just do nothing, and so they have to. Hey Barnabas, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. You're coming in right as I'm about to close down the thing. Yeah, what's Ford supposed to do? He's got to blame somebody. He's got to try to scapegoat somebody. So he's going to scapegoat Trudeau. And there's plenty of things to critique about Trudeau. Like, you could go after Trudeau with all kinds of... It's tough for somebody in Ford's position to do it because Ford and Trudeau fundamentally align on many things. And so, like, the complaints are just kind of petty and stupid. But that makes sense because Ford is a petty and stupid person. Yeah. This story is so ridiculous. I'm so glad to see that it's happening, where the Senate is going to give $10 billion to Jeff Bezos' space firm. Simultaneously, Amazon is buying MGM for about $9 billion. It's having a lot of people be like, but why don't you just not buy MGM and instead... But Amazon has to buy, like, studios like this, right? Because that's how you produce propaganda, right? As we move forward, there's going to be less and less and less producers of film and television generally. And so all of our film and television is going to become about our existential crisis on a, like, individualized sort of basis. So all film and television is going to be about, like, what's the meaning of life, and, like, but in while also tightly showing a capitalist society, right? So it'll be about every individual's, like, plight with their own existence, like, oh, why God, why? But they'll never, ever, 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 ever critique capitalism or critique the billionaires and how they're involved in your life. That will simply be presented as normal, right? That's the end of history. This is what life looks like, right? That capitalism and all of that is just life. You have to just deal with it. And no one will ever, like, the billionaires will never be framed as, like, an antagonist that you have to attack. All of that's just going to be distilled out, because why would Jeff Bezos want to present himself as the villain? And, like, so in that way, our media is just going to become stupid and unfulfilling and dishonest, because we'll watch it and it'll have, like, sparkles and sunshine, but it won't actually fulfill us in any meaningful way, right? Which is why stuff like the Avengers, like that whole thing, right? This is the reason why people get so invested into, like, these Marvel universes and things like this, is because they feel as though it's so big and so vast that it must at some point fulfill me, right? And so if I just keep watching more, at some point I'll finish and I'll be fulfilled. That it'll fill the emptiness inside of me, but it never will, because it's so vapid and dishonest and refuses to actually address anything real and tangible that exists in the world. And because it's so vapid and dishonest, you feel as though there's so much of it that you've convinced yourself that there must be something there. So you consume so much of it, and then at the end of it, you're just like, it's all without merit. It's completely meaningless. It's just dangling keys in front of you. You're literally just spending time on it, right? That's it. It doesn't inform you. It doesn't teach you anything. There's no moral. They're all and they're all like this, right? They're just completely empty. And in the end, you can't even attach it to anything real in your own life because they're completely meaningless. They barely have moral messages at all. And because of the vapidness of them, you end up with a people who know a whole lot about nothing at all. Well, and Barnabas creeping towards fascism. Now we're there, bud. Like, we're there. Like, the Canada Infrastructure Bank means that we are a fascist society. Black and white. Yeah, look at all the useless reality TV shows, all that kind of stuff. Yep. And it's going to get worse, right? It's going to get worse. Everything's going to get much stupider. Oh, everybody needs to go see Middle Ditch and Schwartz? Don't know if I'm spelling this right. I just put it in the chat there. Yeah, the International Monetary Fund's not much better. Middle Ditch and Schwartz is just good improv comedy, and I'm so attracted to it because it's the antithesis of everything I just said. It's literally two guys just making some shit up, but because it's coming out of them, right, and they're creating it on the spot, it's honest, right? And sure, it's just like faffy, good time fun, but it's honest, right? And I think that's what's missing from our media these days, right? Nothing is being created honestly. Like, in terms of the superhero thing, the only thing I've seen out of that whole superhero genre that contained even a shred of honesty was Joker, right? That the film Joker actually approached the subject matter of the character of the Joker with honesty, which is why it was a phenomenal film. That before that Joker, like, we as a culture, we love Joker because he is such an intrinsically honest figure, right? He seeks chaos and destruction for the sake of it. Yeah, humans do that. We love that. And to see the portrayal of the rise of the Joker as a figure who has been abandoned by his society feels very honest and very timely. You ever see The Front Fell Off? Nope, don't know what that is. I got a couple of minutes, so The Front Fell Off.
In 1 hour, you and your family will
3,
be forced to flee
2,
home.
1.
Senator Collins, thanks for coming in.
It's a great pleasure, thank you.
This ship that was involved in the incident off Western Australia this week...
Yeah, the one the front fell off?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very typical. I'd like to make that point.
Well, how is it untypical?
Well, there are a lot of these ships going around the world all the time, and very seldom does anything like this happen. I just don't want people thinking that tankers aren't safe.
Was this tanker safe?
Well, I was thinking more about the other ones.
The ones that are safe?
Yeah, the ones the front doesn't fall off.
Well, if this wasn't safe, why did it have 80,000 tonnes of oil on it?
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't safe. It's just perhaps not quite as safe as some of the other ones.
Why?
Well, some of them are built so the front doesn't fall off at all.
Well, wasn't this built so the front wouldn't fall off?
Well, obviously not.
How do you know?
Well, because the front fell off and 20,000 tonnes of crude oil spilled into the sea caught fire. It's a bit of a giveaway. I just like to make the point that that is not normal.
Well, what sort of standards are these oil tankers built to?
Oh, very rigorous maritime engineering standards.
What sort of thing?
Well, the front's not supposed to fall off for a start.
And what other things?
Well, there are regulations governing the materials that they can be made of.
What materials?
Well, cardboard's out.
And?
No cardboard derivatives.
Like paper?
No paper. No string, no sellotape.
Rubber?
No, rubber's out. They've got to have a steering wheel. There's a minimum crew requirement.
What's the minimum crew?
Oh, 1, I suppose.
So the allegations that they're just designed to carry as much oil as possible, the hell with the
ludicrous.
consequences, I mean, that's ludicrous.
Absolutely ludicrous. These are very, very strong vessels.
So what happened in this case?
Well, the front fell off in this case, by all means, but it's very unusual.
But Senator Collins, why did the front fall off?
Well, a wave hit it.
A wave hit it?
A wave hit the ship.
Is that unusual?
Oh, yeah. At sea, chance in a million.
So what do you do to protect the environment in
Well,
cases like this?
the ship was towed outside the environment.
Into another environment?
No, it's been towed beyond the environment. It's
Yes,
not
but
in the
into
environment.
No, but from one environment to another environment.
No, it's beyond the environment. It's not in an environment. It
Well,
has
it
been
must be
towed
somewhere.
beyond the environment.
Well, what's out there?
Nothing's out
Well,
there.
there must be something
There
out
is
there.
nothing out there. All there is sea and birds and fish.
And
20,000 tonnes of crude oil.
what else?
And a fire.
And anything else?
And the part of the ship that the front fell off. But there's nothing else out there.
Senator Collins, thanks for
It's a
joining
complete void.
us. Yeah, we're out of
The
time.
environment's perfectly safe. We're out of time?
Yeah.
Can you book me a cab?
But didn't you come in a Commonwealth car?
Yes, I did.
What happened?
That
Well, the
sounds
front fell off.
exactly how like oil representatives talk. Just like go in like a circle. That's perfect. Okay, guys, and with that, that's the end of this stream. I hope you guys are all doing really great. You're all doing really wonderfully out there. I know you are. You're making good decisions for yourself. Never forget, you are a divine being standing in divine energy. The capitalists spend billions of dollars to convince you otherwise. Don't let them. Good luck. Mwah. You're going to need it. Oh, we're going to need it.